When the final whistle blows and the crowd begins to fade, there is a silence that feels heavier than victory or defeat. It is the silence of a field stripped of spectacle, of cameras shutting down, of stadium lights humming into darkness. Long before Monday nights became sacred to millions of Americans, that silence was all there was. Football ended on Sunday, and by Monday evening, the country had already moved on to the ordinary rhythm of work and life. There was no ritual under the lights, no shared pulse through living rooms, no nation waiting for the first snap on a weekday night. It was still only a game, and television was still searching for something that could fill the empty spaces between the end of one weekend and the beginning of the next. I often think of those early years when football existed as a regional fascination rather than a cultural heartbeat. The sport had power, yes, but it was confined to stadiums, local radio, and brief Sunday broadcasts. It belonged to those who attended in person, bundled against the cold, their cheers echoing through open air. But something was about to shift. America was entering an age of screens and signals, and television was beginning to rewrite what it meant to gather. In that transition, one bold idea would change not only the NFL, but the identity of the nation itself. Before Monday Night Football, television sports were an afterthought. Networks filled their prime-time slots with sitcoms, dramas, and variety shows because executives believed that sports were too unpredictable, too raw, and too male to hold a national audience. The rhythm of television was polished and predictable. Football, by contrast, was chaos and collision. Yet it was within that chaos that Roone Arledge, a young executive at ABC, saw a kind of cinematic order waiting to be discovered. He believed that football could be more than a broadcast. It could be theater. It could be America's weekly drama, a place where personality met performance and the real collided with the imagined. The idea was not born from safety, but from desperation. ABC was the weakest of the three major networks. Constantly losing ratings battles to CBS and NBC, it needed something bold, something that could redefine its place in the cultural conversation. Arledge proposed the unthinkable: move professional football to Monday night, place it head-to-head with the most profitable entertainment shows in the country, and sell it not as a sport, but as a national event. The NFL hesitated. The network's own board doubted him. Yet the vision burned brighter than the risk. To understand the gravity of that gamble, you must imagine a world where Monday night belonged to silence. Families were gathered around televisions for scripted comfort. Variety shows offered laughter, not conflict. The weekend's games were already forgotten, and the work week pressed forward. Then came the idea that would break that rhythm, that would make Monday a night of noise, tension, and spectacle. It was more than scheduling. It was the invention of a new kind of faith, and America was ready to believe. The birth of Monday Night Football was not just the creation of a program, it was the invention of a ritual. It transformed a game into a weekly congregation, a shared ceremony that blurred the lines between sport and entertainment, player and performer, truth and image. Millions began to mark their weeks, not by days, but by the hours until kickoff. It became a reason to gather, to argue, to cheer, to forget. It was the collective heartbeat of a country that had begun to see itself reflected through the television screen. Yet beneath the glamour, there was tension. The same power that made Monday Night Football revolutionary also made it dangerous. The show brought personalities larger than the game itself, broadcasters who became stars, and a network that began to shape the very narrative of the sport it covered. It was the first time that football was not only played, but produced, not only lived, but performed. The line between authenticity and artifice began to blur. It was no longer just about who won or lost. It was about how it looked, how it sounded, and how it felt in the living room. As I look back, I see how the lights of Monday night became both a mirror and a mask. They illuminated greatness, but also cast long shadows. Behind the excitement was exhaustion. Behind the spectacle was struggle. The men who made it possible were driven by vision, pride, and ego. They changed television forever, but the weight of that change came with its own cost. Every innovation creates its ghost, and the ghosts of Monday Night Football still echo through every broadcast today. When the cameras first rolled on September 21st, 1970, few could have imagined what was being set in motion. The Cleveland Browns and New York Jets stepped onto the field not just to play a game, but to open a new chapter in American culture. The broadcast felt different. The voices in the booth were unpredictable, brash, and alive. Howard Cosell's sharp commentary clashed with Don Meredith's humor. Frank Gifford's steady tone held it together. What had been an experiment quickly became a phenomenon. Ratings soared. America had found something it didn't know it was missing. From that moment on, Monday night was never ordinary again. It became a ritual that stretched across generations. It became the pulse of American identity. The football field was no longer a rectangle of turf, but a national stage, and the men who stepped onto it were no longer just athletes, but characters in an unfolding story. Every tackle, every pass, every mistake carried the weight of performance. The game had become a narrative, and the audience had become a congregation. Football was no longer confined to Sunday afternoons. It had claimed a night of its own, a night that belonged to lights, voices, and millions of eyes. The transformation was not only cultural, but spiritual. Monday Night Football tapped into something ancient and human, the desire to belong to a shared moment, to experience collective emotion through ritual and repetition. It was theater disguised as sport, and sport disguised as destiny. The viewers were no longer passive spectators. They were participants in a national ceremony of triumph and heartbreak. The rhythm of the game became the rhythm of the country itself. But every great transformation carries contradiction. As television elevated football, it also began to consume it. What had once been pure competition became performance art. Every camera angle, every commercial break, every broadcast decision shaped perception. The athletes adapted, understanding that the lens was as powerful as the scoreboard. The coaches and owners learned to speak not just to their teams, but to the audience beyond the field. The game was changing, and so was the meaning of winning. In that sense, Monday Night Football did not just revolutionize television. It rewired the nation's relationship with reality. It blurred the boundary between truth and entertainment, between sport as competition and sport as spectacle. It gave birth to the modern media age, where perception often outlasts performance. It was the beginning of football as mythology and television as the mythmaker. When I think of those first nights, I think of the silence that used to fill Monday evenings. The silence that was broken forever by the opening chords, the roar of the crowd, and the unmistakable sound of a nation watching itself. Monday Night Football was not just a broadcast. It was an awakening. It told America who it was and who it wanted to be. It proved that stories could be told through games, that emotion could be transmitted through light, and that every play could carry the weight of meaning far beyond the field. And yet, beneath the triumph, the darkness remained. The lights that illuminated the field also cast shadows long enough to reach the men behind the microphones, the players beneath the helmets, and the executives behind the cameras. The cost of turning sport into theater would come later, but its seeds were already planted in that first broadcast. Monday nights became sacred, but not without sacrifice. Football under the lights became the nation's new religion, and television became its cathedral. Every kickoff was a sermon, every play a confession of strength and failure. The stadium was the altar, and America gathered week after week to witness the ritual. It was beautiful, it was powerful, it was inevitable. The late 1960s were a time of unrest and reinvention in America. The country was changing faster than it could understand itself. The Vietnam War dragged on. Campuses burned with protest, and television became the lens through which the nation watched its own reflection flicker and distort. It was an era defined by spectacle, by the collision of truth and image. And amid that cultural tremor, the National Football League was preparing for a transformation of its own. Football had long been a game of mud and daylight, of Sunday afternoons spent in cold bleachers and smoky living rooms. It belonged to the loyal few who braved the wind, who memorized lineups and believed in their team as if it were a second religion. But something was shifting. America's appetite for drama, for heroes and villains, for something bigger than the game itself, was growing. And television, newly powerful and insatiably hungry, was waiting to feed it. By the end of the decade, the NFL had outgrown its roots. The league's merger with the rival American Football League promised unity and expansion, but it also created a problem. Too many teams, too many markets, and not enough ways to showcase them. The Sunday schedule, sacred as it was, could no longer contain the growing machine. Networks fought bitterly over broadcast rights, because by then, television revenue wasn't just a bonus, it was the bloodstream of the sport. CBS had Sunday's NFC package, NBC had the AFC, and ABC, the struggling third network, had little more than scraps. In the hierarchy of television, ABC was the underdog, constantly overshadowed by the polished professionalism of its rivals. It needed something bold, something no one else dared to try. That something arrived in the form of a restless producer named Roone Arledge. Arledge was young, ambitious, and fearless. He had already changed the way America watched sports with Wide World of Sports, a program that transformed competition into storytelling. He understood instinctively that people didn't tune in just for scores or statistics. They tuned in for emotion, for theater. He believed that television could make the ordinary feel epic, and that sports could be more than a pastime. They could be entertainment, narrative, ritual. His idea was simple and radical. Bring football into prime time. Air it live on Monday nights, when the weekend was over, when the nation needed something to look forward to or to escape into. It was a gamble against every rule of broadcasting. Executives told him no one would watch. Football was too rough, too regional, too long. But Arledge saw what they didn't. He saw America's growing hunger for shared experience, the power of a single event that could command the attention of millions. In 1970, ABC made the leap. Monday Night Football was born out of desperation and belief. The debut game between the New York Jets and the Cleveland Browns wasn't just a broadcast, it was an experiment in national identity. The lights burned brighter, the cameras moved closer, and for the first time, football wasn't just witnessed. It was performed. Arledge crafted a broadcast that looked and sounded unlike anything before it. He used multiple cameras to capture the game from every angle, not just the safe and distant ones. He hired commentators with personalities as big as the players themselves. Keith Jackson, Don Meredith, and most famously, Howard Cosell, a voice that divided the country and defined the show. Cosell wasn't just calling plays. He was narrating the human drama behind them. Viewers loved him or hated him, but they listened. The formula worked because it mirrored America itself, brash, unpredictable, and larger than life. Monday nights became an event, a communal gathering around the television. Bars filled, streets emptied, families gathered. The football field became a stage, and the players became characters. For 3 hours each week, the sport transcended itself. But success always comes with a price. The moment football became primetime entertainment, it began to change. The game's purity, its hard edges and quiet codes were slowly eroded by the glow of the camera. Players learned to perform as much as they played. Coaches adjusted strategy for spectacle. The league, once a modest fraternity of athletes and owners, transformed into an empire of image management. Television didn't just show the game, it shaped it. Instant replay turned judgment into debate. Slow motion turned violence into beauty. The soundtrack of pads colliding and helmets cracking became part of the rhythm of American life. Stadiums grew larger, lights brighter, the stakes higher. It was no longer enough to win. One had to be seen winning. ABC's gamble paid off beyond imagination. Monday Night Football became a national ritual, a phrase synonymous with the modern NFL. Ratings soared. Advertising rates exploded. The players became household names, their faces as familiar as movie stars. And America, weary from war and division, found something it could agree on, at least for a few hours each week. Yet beneath the roar of the crowd and the hum of the broadcast truck, a quieter story unfolded. Football was no longer just a game played between two teams. It was a business, a performance, a symbol of American aspiration. Every touchdown was a television moment. Every injury, a story. Every controversy, an opportunity for more airtime. The lines between sport and spectacle blurred until no one could tell where one ended and the other began. Arledge had done more than rescue ABC. It altered the DNA of professional football. The league's revenue structure, its cultural weight, and its sense of identity all began to orbit the gravitational pull of television. What aired on Monday night wasn't just a contest. It was a mirror reflecting the country's changing values. Fame had always existed in football, but television magnified it. Quarterbacks became icons. Coaches became legends. The camera turned ordinary men into myth. And once myth took hold, reality had to bend around it. That transformation would define not only the NFL's future, but also the way America understood celebrity, loyalty, and success. As the years passed, Monday Night Football outgrew its own novelty. It became part of the fabric of the week, a drumbeat that marked time in the American calendar. But with familiarity came something else, expectation. The need to outdo the last broadcast, to keep the lights brighter, the commentary louder, the drama more intense. The more America demanded, the more the NFL delivered. By the end of the 1970s, the game that once lived in muddy daylight had become a prime-time empire. It wasn't just played, it was orchestrated. Arledge's vision had turned football into a spectacle that spoke to the heart of American identity, ambition, spectacle, conflict, and triumph. It captured the nation's restlessness, its longing to believe in something larger than life, even if that something came wrapped in shoulder pads and broadcast rights. But behind the brilliance of the lights lay a shadow. With every success came compromise. Television's embrace gave the NFL power, but also dependency. Ratings determined schedules. Sponsors influenced presentation. Image became inseparable from substance. And the same medium that built the league into a cultural colossus would later expose its flaws for all to see. The story of Monday Night Football is more than a chapter in sports history. It's the story of how entertainment consumed authenticity, how a nation's most physical game became its most mediated one. It's the beginning of an era where perception mattered more than performance, and where every play was part of a larger narrative, not just about football, but about who America believed it was. The birth of Monday Night Football wasn't merely a business move, it was a declaration of belief in the power of spectacle. And in that belief, the line between the game and the show began to fade. What followed would shape generations of athletes, broadcasters, and fans. It would create heroes, villains, fortunes, and controversies. It would elevate football to religion and then challenge the very faith it inspired. This is where the real story begins. Before the lights of Monday night illuminated the nation's living rooms, football belonged to Sunday. It was a ritual wrapped in the smell of autumn, in the rhythm of church bells and cold wind. Across the country, men gathered around radios, then black and white televisions, to watch teams grind through muddy fields. The sound of the game was faint, the camera static, the commentary functional. It was a sport for the faithful, not yet a show for the masses. In those early years, football was a man's domain, not by decree, but by habit. It spoke to an older America, one that valued grit over glamour. The game was slow and bruising, a contest of strength and endurance rather than spectacle. It didn't lend itself to the clean lines and tidy narratives television preferred. Baseball fit better on screen. Leisurely, predictable. perfectly divided into innings that allowed for commercials and commentary. Football was chaos by comparison. It was too violent, too unpredictable, too fleeting for a medium still learning how to tell stories in real time. Before 1970, America's viewing habits were rigid. Networks controlled the pace of the evening, and Sunday afternoons were the domain of sports. Monday through Saturday belonged to sitcoms, news, and variety shows. Audiences gathered around family-friendly programming that reassured rather than challenged. Television was the hearth of the home, comforting, dependable, safe. Football, raw and unpredictable, did not yet belong there. Still, the seeds of televised football had already been planted. CBS and NBC experimented with coverage through the 1950s and 1960s, each trying to find a way to make the game more compatible with television's rhythms. The challenge was as much technical as cultural. Cameras were heavy and limited. Angles were few. Replays did not yet exist. The viewer at home was a spectator twice removed, not in the stands, but not yet inside the game either. Producers struggled to capture the essence of football on screen. The pace of the game, filled with short bursts of violence separated by long pauses, didn't align with the linear storytelling that television demanded. Directors didn't know how to transition smoothly between plays. Commentators filled dead air with statistics. And commercials were inserted awkwardly, breaking the flow of tension. It was a format built for radio and adapted clumsily to a new world of moving images. Yet, for all its limitations, television had begun to change football in ways that no one could yet measure. The camera, even in its infancy, had power. It selected what the nation saw and what it did not. A well-timed close-up could make a quarterback seem heroic. A missed shot could erase a moment of brilliance. As coverage improved, so did the stakes. The teams that appeared more often on national broadcasts gained followers far beyond their cities. Television was already shaping fandom before anyone realized it. By the mid-1960s, CBS and NBC had refined the art of sports broadcasting just enough to make football more accessible. The 1958 NFL championship between the Baltimore Colts and New York Giants, often called the greatest game ever played, was a turning point. It was televised live, reaching millions of homes, and its dramatic overtime finish captivated viewers in a way no football game had before. For the first time, television captured the tension of sport as drama. The audience didn't just watch. It felt the narrative unfolding in real time. But even after that breakthrough, football remained largely confined to Sunday. Networks treated it as a supplement to their main programming, not as a cornerstone. The assumption was simple. America's working families were too busy during the week to sit down for a full game. Monday nights were for family comedies and detective shows, not for the noise and collision of sport. Executives believed football's audience was too narrow, too male, too regional to justify prime-time real estate. The network's caution wasn't just about culture, it was about money. Live sports were expensive to produce and unpredictable in length. Television relied on precision. Half-hour comedies, hour-long dramas, predictable endings. Football ignored all of that. Games ran long. Weather caused delays. A single play could shift momentum and throw schedules into chaos. Advertisers hated uncertainty. And so the idea of live football in prime time was dismissed as financial folly. Meanwhile, the league itself was changing faster than television could keep up. The NFL's merger with the AFL in 1966 brought new energy and ambition. The league was expanding into cities that had never known professional football, creating new markets, new rivalries, and a growing sense that the sport was becoming a national language. Attendance soared. Television contracts grew. And yet, the way football was presented to the public remained rooted in an earlier era. Static, limited, and regional. CBS and NBC continued to broadcast Sunday games with a tone of restraint. The commentary was polite, the production straightforward, the presentation devoid of personality. Football was still treated as a sporting event, not a performance. Networks viewed their job as documentation, not interpretation. But a new generation of viewers was coming of age. A generation raised on television, music, and media. They craved something more dynamic, something that matched the speed and emotion of their own lives. The problem was structural. Television had built its schedule like a fortress. Mornings for news, afternoons for soap operas, evenings for escapism, weekends for leisure. There was no room for live sports outside of Sunday. The idea of disrupting that rhythm seemed absurd. But America itself was becoming less predictable. The old certainties of the post-war years were crumbling, and television, the great mirror of the nation, would soon have to adapt. Football, in its raw form, carried something television lacked: authenticity. It was unscripted, emotional, and immediate. Each game was a miniature story of triumph and loss, played out by men whose sweat and pain were real. That kind of reality was something television, with its polished shows and laugh tracks, could not manufacture. And as the media matured, producers began to realize that this tension between performance and reality might be its greatest asset. NBC experimented with pregame shows, trying to humanize players and coaches. CBS tinkered with graphics and analysis, searching for ways to make the game easier to follow. These early innovations hinted at what was possible, but stopped short of reinvention. They lacked vision. No one yet understood how to turn football into theater, how to transform a Sunday ritual into a national conversation. By the end of the 1960s, the gap between what football was and what it could become was clear. The sport had the power to unite Americans across regions and classes, but it still felt distant, like a privilege for the initiated. The games were there, but the stories behind them were not being told. The emotion, the tension, the human stakes, all were flattened by the limits of the medium. And so, as television entered its golden age, football stood on the edge of transformation. The ingredients were all there: a booming league, a restless audience, and a medium hungry for something new. What was missing was the spark, a single idea bold enough to challenge tradition, to bring the game out of Sunday's shadow and into the light of a new era. Before Monday Night Football, America's relationship with the sport was private, local, and loyal, was a reflection of the communities that supported it: steel towns, factory cities, and working-class neighborhoods where Sunday was sacred. No one imagined that football could become a weekday phenomenon, that it could compete with Hollywood, that it could become the center of the national week. Yet, that was exactly what was about to happen. The world before the lights was quiet, ordered, and familiar. But change was coming, and with it, a revolution not just in sport, but in the very way America watched itself. Roone Arledge never looked like a revolutionary, but he carried the mind of one. Before his name became synonymous with the reinvention of sports television, he was just another ambitious producer at ABC, working in a network that trailed behind its competitors in both ratings and reputation. ABC was the third-place network, the underdog in a world ruled by CBS and NBC. Yet, in that struggle, Arledge saw opportunity. He believed television was not simply a tool to transmit information. It was a stage, a canvas, a form of storytelling that could stir the emotions of an entire nation if someone had the courage to try. Arledge's ascent through ABC Sports was not driven by hierarchy or politics, but by vision. He had studied the way audiences responded to television, and he saw something that others had missed. Viewers did not just want to see events, they wanted to feel them. They wanted to understand the faces behind the helmets, the hopes behind the statistics. In his mind, the broadcast was not just about who won or lost, but about what it meant. He believed the power of television could transform the way people experience sport, not as competition, but as shared emotion. In the late 1960s, that idea bordered on heresy. Television executives treated sports like news, factual, detached, and efficient. The camera showed the play, the announcer described it, and the audience moved on. But Arledge thought that missed the point. He wanted to dramatize sport without distorting it, to present athletes as characters in a living story. He wanted the viewer to see what it felt like to win, to lose, to hope, and to fail. In his philosophy, emotion was not a distraction from the game. It was the essence of it. This belief shaped everything he did. When he took charge of ABC's Wide World of Sports, a struggling anthology series, he rebuilt it from the ground up. Instead of focusing on scores, he focused on human drama. Each broadcast became a journey. The camera followed athletes from the locker room to the field, showing their rituals, their fears, their moments of solitude before the storm. He used slow motion to highlight the beauty and violence of movement. And he encouraged commentators to speak less like reporters and more like storytellers. The result was unlike anything else on television. Audiences responded immediately. Ratings climbed. The phrase, the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat, entered American vocabulary. Viewers who had never cared about skiing or boxing found themselves drawn into stories about courage and failure. Arledge had proven something that the television establishment had long denied. That emotion was not weakness. That drama was not manipulation, and that storytelling could make sport universal. With that success came confidence, and with confidence came ambition. Arledge began to imagine how his approach could reshape America's most powerful sport. Football, with its collisions and strategy, its heroes and villains, seemed made for television. But the way it was being presented did not do it justice. The broadcasts were flat and technical, lacking the energy that pulsed through the stadiums. To Arledge, football was not just a game. It was a national ritual waiting to be awakened. A modern mythology hidden in plain sight. He crafted a vision that bordered on audacious. What if football were given the stage it deserved? What if, instead of Sunday afternoons, it was broadcast live in prime time, when the entire country was watching? What if it became an event not just for fans, but for families? A shared experience that cut across age, class, and geography. Arledge believed football could unite America in front of its screens in a way no other program could. But the path to making that vision real would not be easy. ABC was desperate for something that could lift it out of third place. Yet its executives were wary of risk. Prime time was sacred, and the idea of filling it with live sports, unpredictable, expensive, and uncontrolled, seemed reckless. Still, Arledge pressed forward. He began developing a pitch to the National Football League that would challenge everything both sides believed about the medium. His message to the NFL was simple and radical. He told them, make football television's national stage. He argued that Monday night could become more than a slot in the schedule. It could become a tradition. He promised to treat the game not just as sport, but as theater. Every broadcast would have pacing, tension, and personality. Viewers would not only watch the plays, they would know the men who made them. It would be football as spectacle, and it would bring the league closer to the American people than ever before. The NFL was intrigued, but cautious. Its leadership, led by Commissioner Pete Rozelle, understood the growing power of television, but feared overexposure. The league had built its reputation on the idea of scarcity. Sunday was sacred. The one-day fans could see their heroes perform. Moving games to Monday risked diluting that magic. Moreover, Rozelle had long-standing relationships with CBS and NBC, both of which paid heavily for Sunday rights. Giving ABC a piece of the schedule threatened that balance. Owners were equally divided. Some saw potential in Arledge's idea, recognizing that television was quickly becoming the league's lifeblood. Others saw only risk. Stadium attendance was still crucial to team revenue, and they worried that Monday night games would hurt ticket sales. The thought of late-night travel for players and staff, complicated scheduling, and unpredictable weather made the idea seem impractical. To them, it was a gimmick. Rival networks were openly dismissive. CBS and NBC executives mocked the proposal behind closed doors. They saw ABC as desperate, willing to gamble its future on an untested experiment. They had the established audiences, the stable contracts, the proven formats. They did not believe America would change its habits just to watch football after dinner on a weekday. But Roone Arledge was relentless. He had a gift for persuasion that came not from bravado, but from conviction. He spoke with the certainty of someone who had already seen the future. He painted a picture of stadiums glowing under the lights, of families gathering after work, of office conversations the next morning centered not on sitcoms, but on touchdowns. He understood that television was not just a window into the world, it was a maker of ritual. And if he could make football a ritual of the week, he could change not just a network, but a culture. Slowly, momentum began to shift. Pete Rozelle, ever the visionary himself, recognized in Arledge a kindred spirit. He knew the NFL's future depended on embracing the medium rather than resisting it. The league's growing popularity gave him leverage, and he saw that a BC's hunger for relevance might align perfectly with his ambition to expand the NFL's reach. Together, they began shaping the details of what would become Monday Night Football. Arledge promised that ABC would produce the broadcasts unlike anything seen before. He would hire commentators who brought personality, not just analysis. He would build storylines around players, turning them into household names. He would use multiple cameras, creative angles, and replays to capture the emotion of the game. He wanted viewers to feel as if they were part of the action, living it in real time. It was a bold vision, and it carried enormous risk. ABC's leadership hesitated until the last possible moment, fearing the cost of failure. But Arledge's persistence wore them down. He convinced them that fortune favored the bold, that if they did not take this chance, they would always be the network that followed rather than led. In 1970, ABC finally agreed to partner with the NFL to launch Monday Night Football. The announcement stunned the television industry. The third-place network had secured the most daring sports experiment in history. CBS and NBC dismissed it as a temporary stunt. But Arledge and Rozelle knew they were about to redefine how America watched its favorite game. The Visionaries had won the argument, but the real battle to win over the nation was still to come. The lights were ready, the cameras were waiting. And soon, the quiet rhythms of Monday night television would be broken forever. In early 1970, the idea of Monday Night Football hung by a thread. It was not yet destiny, not yet legend. It was a gamble discussed in closed offices, where nervous executives weighed budgets and reputations against a dream that felt too risky to chase. At ABC's headquarters, the mood was cautious. The network had survived for years by accepting its place behind CBS and NBC. It had less money, fewer stars, and a smaller audience. The idea of gambling primetime real estate on live football seemed to some like a desperate act. But to Roone Arledge, it was the only way forward. The negotiation between ABC and the NFL was a battle of vision and caution. Commissioner Pete Rozelle had built the league into a modern powerhouse through discipline and control. He believed in the power of television, but he also understood its danger. Too much exposure could saturate the market. Too little could leave opportunity untapped. When Arledge approached him with the idea of Monday night games, Rozelle saw potential but also peril. The NFL's relationship with CBS and NBC was already delicate. Those networks paid handsomely for Sunday rights and expected exclusivity. Handing a piece of that schedule to ABC could disrupt the balance and invite resentment. For months, discussions moved slowly. Arledge argued that Monday night would expand the NFL's reach without harming Sunday's tradition. He promised spectacle and innovation. He described how ABC would present football as a national event, turning players into personalities and games into theater. Rozelle admired his conviction, but worried about the logistics. Weeknight travel was grueling. Stadium operations were built around weekends. Many teams shared venues with baseball clubs, and scheduling conflicts loomed. The practical challenges alone could sink the idea before it began. Behind the scenes, ABC's top executives were divided. Some saw Monday Night Football as the kind of bold experiment that could rescue the network from irrelevance. Others feared disaster. The network had already suffered losses from expensive projects that failed to connect with audiences. Live sports carried costs that could spiral beyond control. Cameras, crews, and satellite feeds required coordination across multiple cities. If ratings disappointed, the financial hit would be devastating. Arledge refused to give up. He believed timing was on his side. America was changing. The 1960s had ended in turmoil and fatigue. The nation was hungry for something communal, something that could bring people together in a shared moment. He sensed that football, with its pace and passion, could offer that escape. He appealed to ABC's leadership, not through numbers, but through emotion. He promised that Monday nights would belong to America again, that the network could create a new national rhythm. Pete Rozelle tested the idea carefully. He approached CBS and NBC to gauge their interest in broadcasting a weekly primetime game. Both declined. CBS executives said weeknight football would never draw an audience large enough to justify the expense. NBC claimed the schedule was unworkable and that viewers preferred their established lineup of dramas and comedies. Their refusal cleared the way for ABC, but it also magnified the risk. If the experiment failed, it would confirm what the industry already believed, that football belonged only to Sunday. Negotiations between Arledge and Rozelle grew tense as they neared conclusion. ABC wanted flexibility in scheduling and production control. The NFL wanted strict oversight to protect the league's image. Arledge insisted on creative freedom. He wanted to select commentators who could deliver personality, not just play bleed. Hay wanted to craft an opening theme that felt cinematic. He wanted to control camera placement, pacing, and narrative tone. These were not small requests. He was asking a traditional sports league to surrender part of its identity to television. Rozelle understood that Arledge was not proposing a broadcast. He was proposing a transformation, and transformations required trust. The commissioner had built the NFL by taking calculated risks from the merger with the AFL to national television contracts. He sensed that this might be another turning point, but if it went wrong, the backlash would be severe. A failed Monday night experiment could embarrass the league, strain relationships with existing partners, and damage its reputation for professionalism. As talks stretched on, both sides realized they were standing at the edge of something larger than a simple contract. For ABC, success meant salvation. For the NFL, it meant evolution. Yet both knew that failure would bring consequences far beyond lost revenue. If ratings faltered, ABC would lose credibility for years, and the NFL would be accused of overreaching. The weight of that possibility hung over every meeting. Finally, in the spring of 1970, the two sides reached an agreement. The deal was modest by later standards, but revolutionary for its time. ABC would broadcast one game every Monday night for 13 weeks. The network would handle production, commentary, and promotion, while the league would retain control over team selection and scheduling. It was a handshake built on mutual gamble, a network betting its future on a sport, and a league betting its legacy on television. Even after the deal was signed, doubts lingered. Inside ABC, senior executives questioned whether the average American household would stay up late to watch football. Advertisers hesitated, uncertain whether the audience would be large enough to justify primetime rates. Some affiliates resisted airing the games, worried they would lose their regular programming viewers. Arledge knew the only way to silence those doubts was through performance. The first broadcast had to be more than a game. It had to feel like an event. He assembled a production team that shared his sense of urgency. Every decision was guided by the understanding that Monday Night Football could not look or sound like anything else on television. He wanted an opening sequence that felt larger than life, commentary that sparked emotion, and visuals that captured the energy of the stadium. He was crafting not just a program, but a ritual. Still, he knew that if the first few weeks failed to deliver strong ratings, the experiment would be pulled from the schedule without hesitation. The NFL, too, watched nervously. Team owners worried about attendance for Monday games. Some stadiums struggled with lighting adequate for television. Others faced logistical nightmares with short turnaround times between Sunday and Monday events. Coaches and players grumbled about disrupted routines. They had built their careers around Sunday rhythms, and the new schedule threw preparation into chaos. The league's success depended on their cooperation, but not everyone shared the commissioner's enthusiasm. By September of 1970, with the first broadcast date approaching, tension reached a peak. ABC had invested heavily in promotion, saturating newspapers and airwaves with the promise of something new. The tagline was simple but powerful: Monday nights would never be the same. Yet behind the confidence was quiet fear. No one knew how America would respond. Would families tune in after dinner? Or would they return to sitcoms and variety shows? Would football's loyal fans embrace the change or reject it as intrusion? When Pete Rozelle and Roone Arledge finally shook hands, they did so with the knowledge that both their reputations hung in the balance. For Arledge, this was his moment to prove that storytelling could redefine sport. For Rozelle, it was a test of his belief that the NFL could transcend its past and become something greater, a permanent part of American life. The handshake that sealed the deal was more than business. It was a quiet acknowledgement of shared risk. Two men from different worlds betting on a single idea that football under the lights could capture a nation's imagination. The cameras were ready. The schedule was set. The gamble was complete. All that remained was to see if America would watch. The success of Monday Night Football would not rely solely on lights, cameras, or even the novelty of a prime-time slot. Its heartbeat would come from the voices narrating the action, the personalities who could translate the field into something the living room could understand and feel. Roone Arledge understood that more than anyone. He knew that television needed characters, not just announcers. He needed voices that could create tension, drama, and intimacy. And so he assembled a team that would define the show for decades to come. At the center of that team was Howard Cosell. A lawyer turned journalist, Cosell had a voice and style that polarized audiences from the start. He was brash, opinionated, confrontational, and unapologetically intellectual. Some loved him for his candor. Others hated him for the same reason. Yet in Arledge's eyes, Cosell was perfect. He could provoke thought, spark debate, and bring a level of sophistication to the broadcast that elevated it above mere play-by-play narration. He had charisma, wit, and a willingness to challenge the status quo. He was also infuriating to those who expected conformity. Opposite him was Don Meredith, a former Dallas Cowboys quarterback whose easy charm and homespun humor provided a stark contrast to Cosell's sharp intellect. Meredith could tell a story in a single phrase, laugh at the absurdity of the game, and connect with viewers in a way that felt authentic and comforting. He was approachable, relatable, and possessed the kind of charisma that made fans feel as if they were sitting in the stadium itself. His humor softened tension but also created friction with Cosell's acerbic style. Rounding out the original trio was Keith Jackson, whose smooth, authoritative voice had already made him a trusted presence on college football broadcasts. Jackson brought gravitas and balance to the team, grounding the sometimes volatile dynamic between Cosell and Meredith. He could provide context, relay statistics, and describe the game with precision while allowing the personalities around him to flourish. Arledge's design was deliberate. He believed that chemistry, even conflict, could create television magic. He understood that a broadcast with three strong personalities would be unpredictable, but that unpredictability would make the show feel alive. Viewers would tune in not just for the plays on the field, but for the interactions between the commentators themselves. If they argued, teased, or contradicted each other, it would mirror the tension and drama unfolding on the gridiron. Live television thrived on uncertainty, and Arledge intentionally engineered it into the show. The cast, however, was far from harmonious off the air. Cosell's intellect and abrasiveness clashed with Meredith's laid-back manner and disdain for pretension. Jackson, the peacemaker, often found himself mediating between the two. Rehearsals were tense. Early production meetings were filled with disagreements over tone, pacing, and content. Each man had his own sense of authority, his own vision of how football should be presented. The friction, though uncomfortable, was precisely what Arledge sought. Conflict translated into energy, and energy translated into engagement. In addition to interpersonal dynamics, the team faced the unprecedented challenge of live primetime television. Nothing could be rehearsed fully. Games ran on unpredictable schedules. Plays could be chaotic. Audiences at home demanded clarity, drama, and insight, all in real time. The commentators had to adapt quickly, think on their feet, and deliver a coherent narrative even when the field was in turmoil. It was a level of pressure none of them had experienced in quite this way. Before the first broadcast, tension was palpable. Arledge oversaw every detail, instructing camera crews, adjusting microphone placements, and scripting introductory sequences. But he also understood that the magic would emerge spontaneously, in the interaction between the commentators and the action on the field. Cosell, Meredith, and Jackson each carried the weight of expectation. The first game would set the tone for the entire season and could define or destroy the broadcast experiment before it had begun. Arledge also had to manage the optics of the team. Cosell's reputation as a provocateur meant that sponsors and network executives were nervous. Meredith's casual demeanor raised concerns about professionalism. Jackson's calm presence was necessary, but insufficient to counterbalance potential volatility. Arledge navigated these personalities with precision, knowing when to intervene and when to allow natural tension to create television chemistry. The unseen tension extended beyond the commentators. Producers, directors, camera operators, and technical staff all knew that nothing like this had ever been attempted. They were learning on the fly, adjusting to a medium that required immediacy, flexibility, and creative improvisation. A single miscue, a missed angle, a blown camera shot, a delayed replay could derail the broadcast. The pressure was enormous, yet it was also electric. Everyone involved recognized that they were on the brink of something transformative. The broadcast team became the visible embodiment of Monday Night Football's gamble. They represented the collision of sports and spectacle, intellect and humor, tradition and innovation. Their chemistry, volatile and unpredictable, mirrored the energy of the games themselves. They were not just narrators. They were characters in a story that was unfolding live, week after week, for the eyes of millions. As the debut approached, rehearsals gave way to anticipation. Cosell practiced his delivery with meticulous care, fine-tuning inflection and phrasing. Meredith ran lines aloud, exploring ways to balance humor with insight. Jackson reviewed plays and statistics, ensuring he could provide accurate context in the heat of action. Arledge monitored every rehearsal, making adjustments, emphasizing spontaneity, and ensuring that the tension both on and off camera would translate into compelling television. The stakes were immense. ABC had invested heavily in production, promotion, and talent. The NFL had entrusted its reputation to a third-place network, betting that the gamble would expand the league's reach. Sponsors had paid for exposure, expecting audiences that might or might not materialize. And the viewers, millions of them, were waiting to see if Monday nights could become a national ritual, or if the experiment would collapse under its own ambition. In those final hours before the first kickoff, the cast and crew felt the weight of history pressing upon them. Personalities clashed, nerves frayed, and the tension in the control room was nearly palpable. Yet under that pressure, something remarkable was brewing. The combination of Arledge's vision, the commentators' distinct voices, and the potential of live, primetime football created an energy that no rehearsal could replicate. The tension itself became the secret ingredient. The assembly of this cast of voices, with all its conflict, charisma, and unpredictability, set the stage for the revolution to come. Monday Night Football would be defined not just by the plays on the field, but by the drama, wit, and chemistry of the people narrating it. The experiment was risky, the personalities combustible, and the outcome uncertain. And yet, all of it was essential to the alchemy that would turn a simple football game into a national spectacle, unlike anything the country had ever seen. The first broadcast was imminent. Every preparation, every argument, every compromise had led to this moment. The team had been assembled, the vision had been articulated, and the gamble was about to be realized. What happened next would determine whether Monday night would be remembered as a triumph, a curiosity, or a failure. September 21st, 1970, arrived like any other Monday on the calendar. But in American homes, it became a date etched into memory. For the first time, football would not be confined to Sunday afternoons. The nation's living rooms, offices, and bars were about to witness a revolution. Monday Night Football was about to debut. The matchup chosen for this historic broadcast was deliberate. The Cleveland Browns versus the New York Jets. Two teams with passionate fan bases, two rosters featuring recognizable stars, and a game that promised competitiveness and intrigue. Yet nobody could predict what would follow or how the country would react. In the days leading up to the broadcast, anticipation simmered quietly. Television critics were skeptical, advertisers cautiously optimistic, and casual viewers mostly indifferent. The idea of tuning in after a long day of work for a live football game seemed improbable. People were conditioned to Sunday afternoons for sports, and Monday nights were the domain of sitcoms, variety shows, and evening news. Network executives feared that viewers would resist this intrusion into the week's rhythm. But Roone Arledge had a different belief. If presented with drama, excitement, and personality, audiences would come. When the first kickoff finally arrived, the broadcast team was tense but poised. Howard Cosell's voice carried a blend of authority and provocation. Don Meredith's humor added warmth and relatability. And Keith Jackson's calm delivery provided context and continuity. The interplay among the commentators mirrored the unpredictability and energy of the game itself. Arledge had orchestrated every detail, from camera angles to pacing, ensuring that the audience would not simply watch a football game, but experience it as a shared national moment. From the opening moments, it was clear that the gamble had succeeded. Viewers were captivated. The commentary brought the game to life in ways that had never been attempted before. Cosell's observations challenged audiences to think critically about strategy and performance. Meredith's quips humanized the players and added levity, and Jackson's precise narration gave structure to the unfolding chaos. For those watching at home, the broadcast transformed football from a passive spectacle into an immersive experience. The media quickly responded to the broadcast with astonishment. Newspapers ran stories the next morning highlighting the novelty of primetime football and the unique chemistry among the commentators. Critics acknowledged the risks involved in moving football to a weeknight and celebrated a BC's audacity for attempting something bold. Sports writers noted the sense of immediacy and intimacy that television now brought to the game. The commentary team, once a subject of skepticism, became central to the story of the broadcast's success. Headlines emphasized the charisma of Cosell, the humor of Meredith, and the unexpected interplay that made viewers feel as if they were witnessing more than a game, they were witnessing a national conversation. Ratings numbers soon confirmed what many suspected. ABC experienced an unprecedented surge in viewership, shattering expectations for a third-place network. Millions of Americans tuned in, and the overnight success transformed the network's standing almost immediately. Monday Night Football was no longer an experiment. It was a phenomenon. Advertisers clamored for spots, recognizing that primetime football provided access to a broad, engaged, and increasingly loyal audience. The ratings success silenced early critics and vindicated Arledge's vision, demonstrating that football under the lights could captivate a nation in ways no one had imagined. Beyond numbers, the broadcast began reshaping the week for American viewers. Monday evenings, once quiet and predictable, were now charged with energy and anticipation. Families discussed the game during dinner. Office conversations shifted toward the outcome of plays, and friends arranged viewing gatherings around the broadcast. Football had moved from a Sunday ritual into the social fabric of the week, altering patterns of leisure and interaction. Monday nights became a communal experience, a touchstone of culture and a shared point of reference for millions. The first broadcast also highlighted the transformative power of television as a medium. Through camera work, pacing, and commentary, viewers could now see and understand the emotion, strategy, and human drama of football in real time. The visual storytelling elevated the sport from regional pastime to national spectacle. Audiences no longer relied solely on local newspapers, radio reports, or word of mouth to follow the league. Monday Night Football brought immediacy and personality, providing context and narrative that engaged viewers on multiple levels. The success of that first broadcast also carried implications for the league itself. The NFL, previously cautious about expanding its television footprint, saw the enormous potential of prime-time exposure. The league's stars became more widely known, their personalities amplified by the cameras, commentary, and production choices. Players who had been local heroes were suddenly national figures, recognizable to millions. The relationship between athlete and audience evolved, creating new opportunities for endorsement, media appearances, and celebrity status that extended beyond the field. For ABC, the rating success was transformative. The network moved from struggling to relevant, from marginalized to central in the television landscape. Monday Night Football became a cornerstone, a program around which other scheduling decisions could revolve. The show demonstrated that a third-place network could compete with entrenched giants if it was willing to innovate and take calculated risks. It proved that programming could be more than entertainment. It could become a cultural event that shaped perception, conversation, and even social behavior. The broadcast also redefined the expectations of live sports coverage. Audiences anticipated not just a game, but a narrative. They wanted insight, commentary, and personality woven seamlessly into action. The debut had set a precedent for how football would be televised, influencing every network, league, and production team in the decades that followed. Monday nights were no longer an afterthought. They were the proving ground for sports broadcasting innovation. While the first broadcast was a success, it also revealed the pressures inherent in sustaining such an ambitious endeavor. Production teams worked long hours, commentators had to maintain energy week after week, and the league had to coordinate logistics for travel and stadium preparation. Any failure could undermine the momentum gained from the debut. Yet the overwhelming response from viewers and critics provided reassurance that the gamble had been worth it. The reaction among players and coaches was equally significant. Many were initially skeptical of the novelty, concerned about weeknight fatigue and the disruption to routines. By the end of the broadcast, however, the excitement was palpable. They recognized that the exposure provided by primetime television elevated their status and connected them to a wider audience than ever before. For many, it represented both opportunity and a new set of expectations. Football was no longer just a sport. It was a performance for the nation. In retrospect, September 21, 1970, marked a turning point in American culture. The game itself was important, but the broadcast's impact on television, fandom, and national rhythm was profound. Monday nights became a shared temporal landmark, a moment when millions of people engaged with the same story simultaneously. Football under the lights was no longer experimental. It had become a tradition. The debut broadcast set the tone for decades to come. It demonstrated that television could transform sports into spectacle. That storytelling could enhance athletic performance, and that personality could drive engagement. It showed that an audience would respond to innovation if presented with authenticity and drama. Monday Night Football was not just a game. It was a declaration that sports could dominate primetime television and reshape American leisure. the success of the first broadcast proved that vision, risk, and innovation could redefine a nation's relationship with its most beloved sport. It established a template for live sports that would influence broadcasting practices for generations. Monday nights had become more than a night on the calendar. They had become an institution. Monday Night Football quickly evolved beyond a game into a spectacle that reshaped the way America consumed sports. In those early weeks, it became apparent that this was no ordinary broadcast. The combination of cameras, commentary, and primetime placement transformed football from a simple contest of athleticism into theater. Arledge had envisioned television as more than a window into the stadium. It was a stage where every pass, tackle, and touchdown could be magnified, dramatized, and interpreted for a national audience. The technical innovations were part of the transformation. Multiple cameras captured the game from angles previously reserved for professional film crews. Tight shots of players' faces during crucial plays revealed determination, fear, and exhilaration. Sweeping crowd shots showcased the energy of stadiums, the roar of fans, and the pageantry that surrounded the sport. These visual choices allowed viewers at home to experience the atmosphere of live football in a way that had never been possible. Arledge understood that storytelling in sports required more than words. It required visual poetry that could convey emotion, tension, and narrative simultaneously. The production design intentionally blurred the line between journalism and entertainment. While accurate play-by remained essential, Arledge encouraged the commentators to infuse personality, wit, and judgment into their narratives. The broadcast became a layered experience. Viewers were not only following the game, but also engaging with the personalities who explained it. The audience was invited to respond to opinion, critique, and debate as much as to touchdowns or interceptions. Football was no longer a neutral event. It had become a shared cultural performance. Howard Cosell emerged as the perfect embodiment of this transformation. His voice carried authority and provocation in equal measure. Audiences loved him and hated him, often within the same game. He refused to sanitize commentary for comfort, challenging viewers to engage with the complexities of the sport, the personalities of the players, and the controversies surrounding the league. Cosell's abrasive brilliance polarized viewers, but it also drew attention, cementing him as an integral part of the broadcast. His critiques were sharp, his observations meticulous, and his willingness to confront uncomfortable truths made him both feared and revered. Don Meredith provided a complementary presence, humanizing the broadcast with humor, levity, and a relatable charm. His insights, often interspersed with jokes and personal anecdotes, balanced Cosell's intensity. Viewers felt that Meredith spoke directly to them, translating the physicality and strategy of football into stories they could understand and connect with. Keith Jackson and later Frank Gifford reinforced structure and clarity, ensuring that the broadcast remained coherent amid the dynamic interplay of personality and drama. This careful orchestration of talent and technology paid off immediately. Ratings surged week after week, exceeding expectations and defying skeptics. ABC, once a struggling network, found itself commanding the attention of a national audience every Monday night. Advertisers flocked to the program, eager to capture viewers who were now engaged not just with football, but with the broadcast itself. The success of Monday Night Football demonstrated that sports could anchor primetime programming, drawing audiences in ways previously reserved for scripted entertainment. The cultural impact extended beyond ratings. Monday nights became a social event, influencing how people spent their evenings. Families, friends, and coworkers structured activities around the game. Water cooler conversations the following morning revolved around plays, commentary, and personalities. Football became more than a pastime. It became a ritual, a shared experience with national significance. The spectacle of Monday Night Football transformed ordinary individuals into a collective audience, united by anticipation, excitement, and discussion. The blurring of journalism and entertainment also had consequences for the sport itself. Players were now conscious of how they appeared on television, how actions on the field and gestures in the locker room could be interpreted by millions. Media exposure became a double-edged sword, offering fame and recognition while heightening scrutiny. Football was no longer confined to the field. It extended into the living room, into conversations, and into the emerging culture of celebrity. Athletes, coaches, and commentators were suddenly part of a larger narrative that included drama, conflict, and performance beyond the game itself. Critics debated the implications of this transformation. Traditionalists worried that entertainment was overshadowing athletic integrity. They feared that dramatization, commentary, and camera flourishes would compromise the purity of the sport. Yet, for viewers, the spectacle was irresistible. Ratings proved that the appetite for this blend of analysis, personality, and emotion was insatiable. Monday Night Football had tapped into a cultural vein that combined competition, storytelling, and communal experience in a way that television alone could deliver. Howard Cosell's role in the rise of the spectacle was particularly emblematic. His willingness to confront controversial topics, challenge conventional wisdom, and speak with unflinching honesty elevated the broadcast beyond simple observation. He discussed player injuries, league politics, and social issues with candor, prompting discussion and sometimes outrage. His approach demonstrated that sports television could be more than reporting. It could be a forum for analysis, reflection, and debate, engaging viewers on multiple intellectual and emotional levels. The synergy between Cosell, Meredith, Collette created a dynamic that mirrored the tension and excitement of the game itself. Conflict and contrast within the broadcast amplified engagement, while the production innovations allowed audiences to perceive the sport with a newfound immediacy. The interplay of personalities, the layered storytelling, and the technical sophistication of the broadcasts produced a form of entertainment that was immersive, dynamic, and compelling. As Monday Night Football grew in prominence, the line between sporting event and national ritual became increasingly clear. The broadcast was not just a game. It was a performance, a story, and a shared cultural moment. Audiences responded enthusiastically, returning week after week. Drawn not only by the competition on the field, but by the personalities, drama, and spectacle that surrounded it. The experience of watching football had been fundamentally transformed. The rise of Monday Night Football also reshaped the perception of networks and sports broadcasting. ABC, once considered peripheral, had become central to American television. Other networks observed the success with envy and concern, realizing that sports could drive audience engagement in ways previously reserved for scripted drama or variety programming. The industry had been irrevocably changed, and the template established by Arledge, Cosell, Meredith, and the production team would influence every major broadcast for decades. By the end of the first season, the transformation was undeniable. Monday nights were no longer ordinary. They were events, rituals, and experiences that redefined the rhythm of American life. The spectacle of football had become a cultural touchstone, blending athletic competition with television innovation, personality, and emotion. The medium and the message had merged, creating a phenomenon that would endure and evolve with the country itself. Monday Night Football had proven that sport, when treated as theater and infused with narrative, could capture the imagination of millions. The broadcast had elevated football, transformed television, and reshaped cultural expectations. Audiences were not simply watching, they were participating, engaging, and defining a new form of national ritual. The line between journalism and entertainment, between analysis and performance, had been redrawn, and the effects would reverberate for generations. Howard Cosell's rise during the early years of Monday Night Football transformed the broadcast booth into a stage far larger than anyone had anticipated. He was more than a commentator. He became the voice of a nation, a figure whose observations, judgments, and provocations sparked conversation across dinner tables, offices, and living rooms. Cosell polarized audiences with a rare intensity. Some adored his intellect, his fearlessness, and the authority with which he spoke. Others despised him, viewing his acerbic delivery as arrogance or spectacle over substance. Yet there was no denying that he commanded attention. And in the context of Monday Night Football, that attention was essential. Cosell's dynamic with Muhammad Ali exemplified the power of personality and principle in sports broadcasting. Their interactions were electric, unpredictable, and layered with social significance. Cosell recognized Ali not just as a phenomenal athlete, but as a cultural figure whose impact extended beyond the boxing ring. He commented openly on Ali's stances, from his refusal to fight in Vietnam to his outspoken views on race and justice. On air, Cosell did not shy away from controversy, and his willingness to address social issues through the lens of sport elevated the broadcast. Booth, from mere observation to commentary on broader American life. The impact of Cosell's commentary was profound. For the first time, viewers witnessed a commentator treating sports as inseparable from culture, politics, and ethics. His discussions of Ali's choices challenged the audience to think critically about morality, identity, and justice. Fans and critics alike debated the appropriateness of this approach, but the attention it drew reinforced the idea that sports television could do more than relay results. It could provoke thought, stir emotion, and foster national dialogue. Cosell's presence also highlighted the tension between honesty and public relations, between truth and the polished narrative that television often demanded. He was unafraid to critique players, coaches, and even league decisions, often challenging the official storylines presented by teams or the NFL itself. Sponsors and network executives occasionally bristled at his bluntness, worried about alienating viewers or drawing controversy. Yet his credibility stemmed precisely from that fearlessness. Audiences recognized that Cosell's commentary was grounded in knowledge, observation, and integrity. He did not pander, and that authenticity became a hallmark of Monday Night Football. The broadcast booth became a forum where the country could engage with differing perspectives. Cosell's critiques often prompted responses from Meredith, Gifford, or the production team, creating a dynamic that mirrored broader societal debates. In this way, Monday Night Football transcended entertainment, becoming a reflection of the national conversation. Viewers were not passive. They engaged, argued, and reacted in real time to the interactions unfolding above the field. The booth became America's argument table, a place where football intersected with ethics, identity, and cultural values. Cosell's style also redefined the relationship between athlete and audience. Players were no longer just performers on the field. They became subjects of analysis, moral scrutiny, and narrative framing. Audiences absorbed not just statistics and highlights, but insight, interpretation, and judgment. Cosell's commentary demanded engagement, forcing viewers to consider context, motivation, and consequence. This approach elevated both the sport and the broadcast, creating a sophisticated, layered experience that challenged assumptions about the role of television in American life. His commentary on Ali, in particular, demonstrated the ability of sports broadcasting to intersect with social consciousness. Cosell refused to treat Ali's stance as mere spectacle, instead framing it as a reflection of the nation's tensions and struggles. This approach sparked debate among fans and critics, but also established a precedent for thoughtful, courageous commentary within sports media. Cosell showed that a voice in the booth could influence perception, provoke dialogue, and illuminate broader truths through the lens of athletic performance. The duality of Cosell's reception mirrored the broader tension in Monday Night Football. Self, a blend of entertainment and substance, spectacle and analysis. Some viewers sought humor, drama, and charisma. Others sought insight, ethics, and honesty. Cosell delivered all of this simultaneously, forcing the broadcast to occupy multiple spaces at once. The result was a program that felt alive, dynamic, and consequential, where every comment, observation, or argument carried weight beyond the immediate action on the field. Critics initially questioned whether such a confrontational style could succeed in primetime television. Would audiences reject a commentator who challenged them, provoked them, or force them to confront uncomfortable truths. The ratings, however, suggested otherwise. Viewers tuned in not only for the games, but for Cosell's presence, the tension in the booth, and the debates that unfolded alongside the competition. His voice became inseparable from the identity of Monday Night Football itself. The broadcast booth also reflected the evolving cultural landscape of America. Issues of race, politics, and social change were increasingly unavoidable, and sports television became a lens through which to view these transformations. Cosell's commentary on Ali, his critiques of league decisions, and his willingness to address controversy provided a model for how sports media could participate in larger cultural conversations without losing focus on the game. He demonstrated that sports were not insulated from the realities of society, but rather an active arena for engagement and reflection. The result was a layered, emotionally charged experience for viewers. Monday Night Football was no longer just about touchdowns and tackles. It became about conversation, analysis, and moral engagement. Audiences were drawn to the broadcast not solely for athletic competition, but for the opportunity to witness discourse, reflection, and confrontation in real time. The booth became a platform for ideas as much as it was a stage for football. By transforming the role of the commentator, Cosell ensured that Monday Night Football would have an enduring cultural impact. His voice, personality, and principles defined the broadcast and shaped how future commentators approached the medium. The balance of controversy, insight, and personality set a standard for sports journalism that persists decades later. It was no longer enough to report the score. Commentators could interpret, critique, and contextualize the sport within broader societal frameworks. Audiences embraced the complexity of Cosell's presence. They engaged emotionally, intellectually, and morally. They debated his positions, absorbed his analysis, and followed the game through a lens that combined sport with culture. Monday Night Football had become a vehicle for both entertainment and reflection, with the broadcast booth serving as the focal point for national discourse. Through his interactions with Ali, his willingness to challenge convention, and his unapologetic honesty, Cosell transformed Monday Night Football into more than a program. It became an institution capable of shaping opinion, provoking dialogue, and reflecting the tensions and triumphs of American society. The broadcast booth was no longer a place of mere narration. It had become a forum, a proving ground for intellect, ethics, and emotional engagement. Howard Cosell's tenure on Monday Night Football exemplified the power of personality, principle, and presence. His impact extended beyond ratings and popularity. He redefined what it meant to comment on sports, proving that the voice in the booth could influence culture, provoke discussion, and challenge audiences to think critically. The program's evolution into a national spectacle was inseparable from the boldness and brilliance of its most polarizing figure. Monday Night Football had become more than a broadcast, more than a game. It had become a mirror of American life, reflecting the tensions, passions, and conversations that defined a nation. Howard Cosell was at the center of that transformation, and his voice ensured that the program would resonate far beyond the field of play. The booth had become America's argument table, a place where sport, culture, and conscience collided, and where every Monday night carried the weight of history, expectation, and engagement. Don Meredith was more than a commentator. He was the soul of Monday Night Football, the voice that brought warmth, charm, and a humanity to the broadcast that balanced the intensity of the competition and the sharpness of Howard Cosell. Meredith's presence was magnetic in a way that audiences felt immediately, even if they did not consciously recognize it. His humor was spontaneous, his quips effortless, and his perspective grounded in the experience of a player who had known the thrill and pain of the game firsthand. Unlike many announcers who relied solely on statistics or wrote play-by-play, Meredith spoke from intuition, from memory, from the lived reality of a man who had walked the line between triumph and defeat on the gridiron. His charm was not just about levity, it was about connection. Meredith had an ability to make viewers feel as if they were sitting beside him, sharing the experience rather than observing it at a distance. He could transform a complex play into a story that resonated, humanizing the athletes in ways that transcended mere athleticism. Fans came to rely on his voice as a guide, a lens through which the emotion and drama of the game could be understood. Humor, in Meredith's case, was not distraction, it was bridge. It allowed audiences to experience joy and tension simultaneously, laughing at the absurdities of the moment while appreciating the seriousness of the contest. Unpredictability defined Meredith's commentary. He rarely adhered to a script or formula. A joke might appear in the middle of a critical play. A personal anecdote might illuminate a quarterback's mindset. Or a spontaneous reaction might punctuate a dramatic moment on the field. This unpredictability mirrored the game itself, reinforcing the sense that anything could happen, and that viewers were witnessing events in real time, not mediated through artificial structure. Meredith's spontaneity became a hallmark of the broadcast, and his presence created a rhythm that audiences anticipated week after week. The balance between showmanship and sport was delicate, and Meredith managed it with remarkable skill. He understood that the game itself had to remain central, that every touchdown, interception, and tackle mattered. Yet he also recognized that the way the game was presented through humor, storytelling, and personality was equally important for engagement. Meredith embodied that balance, honoring the sport while enhancing it for television. He created a space where viewers could feel both the tension of competition and the joy of human expression, blending performance and analysis without sacrificing either. Meredith's impact was felt not only in his commentary, but in the broader culture of the broadcast. He softened the edges of Cosell's abrasiveness without diluting it, creating a dynamic interplay that became central to the show's identity. Audiences came to expect the contrast, to appreciate the dialogue between Meredith's warmth and Cosell's incisive critiques. It was this tension and balance that contributed to the program's enduring appeal, demonstrating that personality, when grounded in authenticity, could elevate a broadcast beyond its basic purpose. The emotional resonance of Meredith's presence extended beyond the routine of the broadcast. When he departed, audiences felt the absence keenly. His humor, insight, and charisma were missed, and the dynamic of the booth shifted in ways that revealed how central he had become. His returns, even temporarily, were celebrated, as if the broadcast regained a vital part of its heartbeat. Meredith had cultivated trust and familiarity with viewers, and that bond created an emotional depth rarely associated with sports commentary. Fans were not just watching a game, they were engaging with a companion, someone who made the experience richer and more personal. Meredith's ability to humanize players was particularly significant in the early years of Monday Night Football. While the sport had always celebrated heroics, television brought athletes into the intimate spaces of viewers' homes. Meredith helped translate performance into personality, converting complex strategies and plays into narratives that audiences could relate to and feel invested in. His observations revealed the fears, hopes, and motivations of players, bridging the gap between professional athlete and everyday viewer. Football became more than a contest. It became a story about people, emotions, and shared experience. The interplay between Meredith and Cosell, often contrasting and sometimes contentious, amplified the broadcast's impact. Where Cosell provoked thought, Meredith invited empathy. Where Cosell dissected strategy with precision, Meredith illuminated the human side of competition. This duality created a texture and rhythm that captivated audiences, offering a multi-dimensional experience that went beyond the technicalities of the sport. Viewers were engaged cognitively and emotionally, challenged to think, feel, and react simultaneously. Meredith's unpredictability also brought an element of spontaneity to Monday nights that reinforced the idea of live television as living, breathing performance. He could shift tone in an instant, weaving humor into tension, storytelling into analysis, and insight into anecdote. This fluidity made the broadcast feel alive and authentic, a reflection of the game's inherent uncertainty and excitement. Audiences sensed this authenticity, responding with loyalty and enthusiasm that helped cement the show's place in American culture. Beyond individual games, Meredith's presence influenced the evolution of sports broadcasting as a whole. He demonstrated that commentary could be entertaining without sacrificing credibility, that personality could coexist with analysis, and that humor could enhance rather than detract from the audience's understanding of the game. Future broadcasters would study and emulate this model, recognizing that engagement depended as much on human connection as on technical expertise. The emotional imprint of Meredith's contributions was magnified over time. Fans recalled specific quips, humorous observations, and moments of insight that became part of their personal memory of Monday nights. His voice, tone, and timing left a lasting impression, and the broadcast became inseparable from his personality. Meredith exemplified the way in which a commentator could shape perception, create intimacy, and provide both entertainment and context, leaving a legacy that endured long after individual games ended. Meredith's influence was also evident in how viewers experienced suspense and drama. He could punctuate a tense moment with a laugh, a sigh, or a personal observation, guiding audiences through the emotional arc of the game. This subtle orchestration allowed viewers to feel the stakes, the risk, and the exhilaration as if they were part of the action. Football became a shared emotional journey, facilitated by a voice that understood both the technical demands of the sport and the emotional rhythms of its audience. The combination of humor, charm, and unpredictability made Don Meredith indispensable to Monday Night Football. He was not just a voice. He was an emotional conduit, a bridge between the stadium and the living room, between the players and the fans. His contributions exemplified the potential of sports commentary to elevate, humanize, and transform the viewing experience. Meredith reminded audiences that football was about more than scores and statistics. It was about people, drama, and shared experience. The departure and subsequent returns of Meredith underscored his importance. Each absence revealed how integral he had become to the rhythm and soul of the broadcast. His voice had become synonymous with the identity of Monday Night Football, and his presence was central to the emotional texture that made the show compelling week after week. Audiences responded not only to the games, but to the continuity of personality that he provided, reinforcing the idea that a commentator could be as essential to a broadcast as the athletes themselves. Don Meredith's legacy within Monday Night Football extends beyond technical skill, analysis, or ratings. He created a model for authenticity, warmth, and emotional intelligence in sports broadcasting. He demonstrated the value of humor, unpredictability, and relatability, showing that a commentator could be both informative and entertaining without sacrificing credibility. His influence on the medium endures, and his contributions helped define an era in which television, its personality, and sport converged to create a cultural phenomenon. Through humor, charm, and unpredictability, Don Meredith became the heart of Monday Night Football. He balanced spectacle with substance, showmanship with sport, and analysis with human connection. His presence shaped the emotional and cultural identity of the broadcast, leaving a mark on audiences and the evolution of sports television that remains enduring and profound. Monday Night Football did more than capture viewers. It reshaped the rhythms of American life. Before 1970, Monday evenings were largely ordinary, governed by routine. Families cooked dinner, offices emptied according to local patterns, and television programming followed predictable formulas. The introduction of a live football broadcast into this landscape caused an immediate cultural ripple. People began to reorganize their nights around the game, scheduling dinners, social gatherings, and even work commitments with an eye toward kickoff. Monday nights, once a transitional moment between the work week and the week ahead, had become a destination, a shared temporal event that demanded attention and participation. In homes across the country, television sets became the focal point of the evening. Families who had previously seen football as a Sunday pastime now found themselves engaged on a weekday. The broadcast pulling multiple generations together in ways previously uncommon. Parents and children, who might have previously been separated by different viewing habits, found common ground in the shared excitement of the game. Conversations after kickoff ranged from the plays themselves to the commentary of Howard Cosell, the humor of Don Meredith, and the dynamic of the broadcast team. The games became a topic of discussion, debate, and storytelling, influencing not only the evening itself, but the social interactions that followed. Public spaces such as bars, restaurants, and community centers quickly adapted to the new phenomenon. Monday evenings became a time when establishments would gather patrons around televisions, anticipating the energy and spectacle that ABC delivered. In cities across the country, crowds congregated to watch games, bringing together diverse groups of people who were united by the shared experience. This communal consumption of sports contributed to a sense of collective identity, reinforcing football not just as entertainment, but as a cultural force. The energy was palpable. Streets, homes, and gathering places were infused with anticipation, and the nation collectively tuned in as if adhering to a shared ritual. Advertisers rapidly recognized the opportunity embedded in Monday Night Football. The program offered access to a broad, engaged, and highly responsive audience during a primetime slot. Companies that had previously relied on traditional programming discovered that sports broadcasting could generate immediate and measurable attention. The demographic appeal was broad. Men, women, and younger viewers all tuned in, drawn not only by the athletic competition, but by the personalities and narrative arcs that had become integral to the broadcast. Sponsors began to invest heavily, reshaping marketing strategies and recognizing that the broadcast had created a new kind of goldmine engaged, emotionally invested audience whose attention could be reliably captured week after week. The phenomenon extended beyond individual households. Cities and towns adjusted to the new rhythm with traffic patterns, public events, and even workplace conversations aligning with the schedule of Monday Night Football. Businesses acknowledged that employees might be less attentive during critical moments of the game, and social activities were increasingly planned to coincide with or accommodate the broadcast. This alignment reflected not only the popularity of the program, but its cultural integration, demonstrating that Monday nights had been transformed into a temporal anchor within the week. The show's impact also contributed to the evolving perception of football as more than a sport. Previously, football was celebrated regionally, with fans supporting local teams and following games primarily through radio or Sunday newspapers. Monday Night Football amplified the reach and significance of the sport, providing nationwide exposure and creating shared points of reference that transcended regional loyalty. The league's stars became household names, and performances that might have been celebrated locally were now recognized and remembered across the country. Football, under the bright lights of prime-time television, had entered the national consciousness in an unprecedented way. Cultural rituals shifted in parallel with the broadcast's growing popularity. Families incorporated viewing into traditions, such as preparing specific meals or snacks to enjoy during the game, or gathering with friends and neighbors for group watching experiences. Communities organized events that revolved around the broadcast, fostering local engagement while reinforcing the show's centrality in American life. Monday nights had become a cultural touchstone, a predictable yet eagerly anticipated moment that structured both private and public routines. The emotional engagement of viewers also deepened the cultural significance. Unlike a pre-recorded show or movie, Monday Night Football offered real-time suspense, unpredictability, and immediacy. Viewers felt part of the unfolding narrative, invested not only in the outcome of plays, but in the drama, personalities, and commentary that defined the broadcast. The tension of a close game, the humor of an unexpected quip, and the brilliance of a strategic play were shared experiences, reinforcing the communal dimension of football as both sport and spectacle. Networks and advertisers leveraged this new cultural integration, adapting programming, commercial placement, and promotional strategies around the broadcast. The alignment of commerce and entertainment became more sophisticated, demonstrating how a single program could influence scheduling, content, and consumption across multiple sectors. ABC's success with Monday Night Football established a blueprint for future programming, proving that sports could serve as both cultural anchor and commercial engine. The audience's devotion translated directly into revenue, shaping the television industry's approach to primetime programming for decades to come. Monday Night Football also redefined the week itself. Sunday afternoons had long served as the temporal and emotional apex of football fandom. Monday evenings, however, offered a new peak, extending engagement and creating anticipation for a second, separate but equally important event. The week's rhythm adjusted. Anticipation for the upcoming Monday game became part of fan culture. Conversations at work and school were framed around predictions. An analysis of prior performances informed expectations for the next broadcast. This temporal restructuring reflected both the program's popularity and its ability to influence broader cultural patterns. The phenomenon also fostered intergenerational dialogue. Parents, children, and extended family members engaged with the broadcast differently, but all were unified by the shared experience. Football became a language, a set of references, and a point of connection. Young viewers who might have been introduced to the sport for the first time through Monday Night Football developed early attachments, while seasoned fans gained new ways to interpret and experience the game through commentary, replay, and spectacle. The broadcast had created a bridge between generations, strengthening football's role in American life. Beyond homes and communities, Monday Night Football contributed to the formation of a national cultural identity. The simultaneous participation of millions of viewers created shared experiences that transcended regional, social, and economic differences. The broadcast became a reference point in conversations, a backdrop to social gatherings, and a marker of collective attention. Football was no longer a localized or occasional pastime. It was integrated into the national rhythm, contributing to a shared sense of culture and belonging. The intersection of sport, media, and society revealed by Monday Night Football underscored the transformative power of televised athletics. The program influenced behavior, conversation, and social organization, demonstrating that a broadcast could extend its impact far beyond entertainment. Families, bars, cities, and advertisers all adapted to the new temporal and cultural order, acknowledging that the spectacle of football had become a central axis around which American life turned. By transforming the nation's weekly rhythm, Monday Night Football secured its position as more than a television program. It became a cultural earthquake, reshaping time, attention, and social patterns. The nation stopped, collectively, to watch, discuss, and engage with the sport in ways that had never been experienced before. Football under the lights had become a shared ritual, a unifying event, and a powerful cultural force, establishing Monday nights as a moment of both spectacle and social significance. Monday Night Football had become a cultural juggernaut, but behind the glow of studio lights and the roar of stadium crowds lay a more complicated reality. Stardom brought opportunity, visibility, and influence, but it also brought pressure, scrutiny, and personal cost. For broadcasters, the rise of primetime football demanded performance beyond the ordinary. Each week, millions of eyes were trained on the broadcast team, expecting clarity, insight, and charisma delivered flawlessly. The stakes were high, and the pressure to perform without error created a unique and often invisible tension within the booth. Howard Cosell, with his polarizing voice and uncompromising approach, faced scrutiny that went beyond typical broadcast criticism. His every statement was dissected, amplified, and sometimes misinterpreted by the media and the audience. The intensity of national attention created an environment in which mistakes, real or perceived, were magnified, and the margin for error was vanishingly small. While his fearlessness commanded respect, it also made him a lightning rod for controversy. Cosell's brilliance was inseparable from the burden of constant evaluation, and the scrutiny weighed heavily, both publicly and privately. Don Meredith experienced a different set of pressures. His charm and humor were essential to the show's success, but they were also performances that had to be sustained week after week. Spontaneity, while a signature strength, carried risks. A misjudged quip or poorly timed anecdote could disrupt the flow of the broadcast or invite criticism from network executives. Meredith's natural ease with humor masked the discipline and awareness required to navigate live primetime television. Even his reputation as the heart of the show was earned through constant vigilance and adaptability under the public eye. The dynamic between Cosell and Meredith, while central to the program's appeal, was not without friction. Their contrasting personalities created a productive tension on air. But off-camera, the differences sometimes intensified into rivalries. Competing egos, divergent philosophies, and occasional disagreements over tone or interpretation required careful management. These internal conflicts were not always visible to the audience, yet they shaped the atmosphere of the broadcast and influenced the way commentary was delivered. The chemistry that seemed effortless to viewers often required negotiation, compromise, and emotional labor behind the scenes. Keith Jackson and later Frank Gifford navigated similar challenges. As the stabilizing voices within the booth, they were expected to mediate, clarify, and maintain coherence. Yet they too faced the weight of visibility, performance, and public expectation. Each member of the broadcast team carried the dual responsibility of delivering expert commentary while performing a role that entertained, engaged, and held attention. The constant balancing of these demands created a psychological intensity that few viewers could fully appreciate. Beyond individual pressures, Monday Night Football operated within a complex web of corporate oversight and network politics. Roone Arledge's growing influence at ABC was both a stabilizing and controlling force. His vision for the program was precise and ambitious, and he demanded adherence to production standards, messaging, and presentation. While his leadership ensured consistency and innovation, it also created tension. Decisions about tone, narrative, and focus were sometimes contested, and the pressure to align with corporate expectations added another layer of scrutiny for the broadcasters. The balance between creative autonomy and executive oversight was delicate, and navigating it required both skill and diplomacy. The culture of stardom extended to the players as well. Athletes were now performing not only for the stadium crowd, but for millions of viewers at home. The spotlight intensified every action, every decision, and every mistake. Pressure to perform perfectly on the field was magnified by the knowledge that every play was being broadcast to a national audience. Injuries, fatigue, and personal challenges became highly visible, contributing to a heightened sense of vulnerability and exposure. The weight of expectation transformed the game into a performance in ways that extended beyond athletic ability. The early success of Monday Night Football also intensified the stakes of competition within the league. Players and coaches recognized the additional exposure as both opportunity and hazard. A single mistake or misstep could dominate media narratives, influence public perception, and even affect contracts or endorsements. The amplification of every action, combined with the pressure of primetime scrutiny, introduced a psychological dimension to the game that rivaled its physical demands. Performance anxiety became an invisible but pervasive factor in both the booth and on the field. The Darkside of Stardom was also evident in the way fame altered interpersonal relationships. Rivalries, envy, and professional jealousy existed alongside genuine camaraderie and collaboration. The broadcast team's cohesion was maintained through negotiation, humor, and mutual respect. But the intensity of public attention could exacerbate conflicts. Misunderstandings, professional disagreements, and personal insecurities were magnified under the spotlight, requiring careful management to prevent disruption to the broadcast or the program's reputation. For Arledge, the success of Monday Night Football was both a triumph and a responsibility that weighed heavily. His vision demanded constant innovation, precise execution, and alignment between talent, production, and corporate objectives. Maintaining control over the program while fostering creativity and authenticity required strategic acumen and careful interpersonal management. The stakes of failure were immense, not just for ratings, but for the credibility of ABC, the careers of those involved, and the reputation of the league itself. Internal rivalries were not limited to personality clashes. Differences in perspective about style, tone, and storytelling sometimes became sources of friction. Each member of the broadcast team had a vision of how the game should be presented, and reconciling these visions demanded negotiation and compromise. Decisions about emphasis, commentary, and narrative framing were not neutral. They reflected competing ideas about the role of television, the audience's expectations, and the integrity of the sport. Managing these tensions was an ongoing challenge, and it contributed to the intensity and complexity of producing a live national broadcast. The combination of celebrity, exposure, and pressure created a unique professional environment. The booth was simultaneously a workplace, a stage, and a cultural forum. The boundaries between professional duties and personal identity became blurred. As public perception shaped private experience, mistakes were not easily forgotten, and successes were amplified and remembered. The weight of constant observation and expectation created a persistent stress that influenced decisions, behavior, and performance. Despite these pressures, the broadcast team delivered consistently. The interplay of Cosell, Meredith, and their colleagues continued to captivate audiences, sustaining ratings and cultural impact. Their ability to perform under pressure, navigate internal dynamics, and maintain authenticity contributed to the program's enduring influence. The tension between performance and expectation became an invisible engine that fueled the energy, drama, and unpredictability that viewers experienced. The rise of stardom also revealed the broader implications of visibility and influence in American culture. Monday Night Football became a platform where personalities could shape perception, provoke debate, and influence national conversation. Fame carried power, but with that power came scrutiny, pressure, and ethical responsibility. The consequences of mistakes or misjudgments extended beyond the individuals involved, impacting networks, advertisers, and the cultural perception of the sport. Ultimately, the Darkside of Stardom demonstrated that success in high-profile broadcasts came at a cost. Performance under scrutiny, interpersonal rivalries, and corporate oversight created an environment of constant pressure. For both broadcasters and players, the demands of visibility were relentless. The tension between personal integrity, professional expectations, and public perception defined the psychological landscape of Monday Night Football, shaping the experience for those in the booth as profoundly as for those on the field. Monday Night Football's cultural and professional significance was inseparable from the pressures it imposed. Fame and exposure, while exhilarating and rewarding, brought a weight that few could fully articulate. For Cosell, Meredith, and their colleagues, the booth became a stage of constant performance, negotiation, and adaptation. The intensity of these demands, combined with the broader stakes of the program's success, revealed the human cost behind the spectacle, the unseen stress beneath the celebration, and the complexity of maintaining excellence under the glare of national attention. Monday Night Football was more than a television program. It was a mirror reflecting the complexities, contradictions, and transformations of America in the 1970s. At a time when the country grappled with issues of race, the ongoing war in Vietnam, and a rapidly changing media landscape, the broadcast became a space where these tensions were both visible and mediated. The program did not exist in a vacuum. It operated within a culture in flux, where the expectations of audiences, the imperatives of networks, and the personalities of broadcasters intersected in ways that illuminated the broader American experience. Race was an undercurrent and at times a visible element in the broadcast and its reception. The NFL itself was undergoing significant shifts. Teams were integrating more fully, and African American athletes were increasingly prominent on the field. Yet disparities and prejudice persisted. Viewers were confronted with both the athletic brilliance of these players and the social realities that accompanied their rise. Howard Cosell's commentary often addressed social issues directly, most famously in his outspoken support for Muhammad Ali, whose conscientious objection to the Vietnam War made him a controversial figure. Cosell's willingness to intertwine sports and social commentary created tension, admiration, and sometimes outrage. It forced viewers to reconcile their entertainment with ethical and political realities. The Vietnam War loomed over the era, influencing national mood, public discourse, and cultural consumption. Monday Night Football offered an escape, a spectacle that allowed Americans to temporarily shift focus, yet it could not completely detach from the realities outside the stadium. References to patriotism, military service, and national identity were occasionally woven into broadcasts, consciously or unconsciously reflecting the anxieties and hopes of a country in conflict. The broadcast became a site where national identity and personal allegiance were both expressed and contested. The program's audience was diverse, and the interpretations of what unfolded on screen were shaped by personal experience, regional identity, and political perspective. Media itself was undergoing transformation, and Monday Night Football occupied the center of this evolution. The convergence of sports, television, and cultural commentary exemplified a new model of mass communication. Networks wrestled with the tension between entertainment and journalistic integrity, striving to attract viewers while maintaining credibility. ABC, under Roone Arledge, recognized the opportunity to create drama, to present personalities, and to shape narratives in ways that traditional broadcasts had not attempted. Yet this approach raised questions about responsibility, accuracy, and the line between information and spectacle. The network struggled to balance honesty with engagement mirrored broader debates in media at the time, reflecting the growing power of television to influence perception and public opinion. The program's reflection of social change was not limited to commentary. The very structure of Monday Night Football contributed to its role as cultural mirror. The broadcast blended play-by with analysis, narrative, and human interest, creating a multi-dimensional experience that encouraged viewers to interpret meaning beyond the scoreboard. Audiences were exposed to the personalities of athletes, coaches, and commentators. And through these figures, broader cultural and social dynamics were rendered visible. The show became a space where conflict, negotiation, chulo sula, and resolution were performed both on and off the field, offering insights into human behavior, societal values, and the evolving norms of the era. Censorship and network control were constant considerations. The network had to navigate public sensibilities, advertiser concerns, and the unpredictability of live sports. Controversial statements, unscripted remarks, and culturally sensitive topics required careful management. Cosell's candidness, in particular, challenged the network to reconcile authenticity with risk, while his forthright commentary earned him admiration and criticism. It also highlighted the tensions inherent in producing a broadcast that sought to reflect reality while satisfying commercial and institutional imperatives. These tensions were emblematic of the broader societal struggle to balance truth, responsibility, and entertainment. Monday Night Football became a venue for exploring ethical and moral dilemmas indirectly, by presenting the human stories behind the sport athletes overcoming adversity, coaches navigating pressure, broadcasters negotiating personalities. The program invited audiences to consider broader questions of fairness, justice, and accountability. The intensity of competition and the dramatization of personal triumph and failure mirrored the ethical and social debates occurring across the nation. Viewers were compelled to witness, interpret, and react, making the broadcast both participatory and reflective of contemporary values. The program's influence on national discourse extended to perception of race and equality in professional sports. The visibility of African American athletes and their interactions with teammates, opponents, and commentators challenged assumptions and prompted dialogue. Cosell's commentary on Ali and other athletes exemplified a willingness to address these issues head-on. While the inclusion of diverse voices within the broadcast contributed to shifting perspectives, the audience was confronted with excellence and controversy simultaneously, reinforcing the role of Monday Night Football as a cultural touchstone that reflected ongoing societal struggles. In addition to race and war, the broadcast mirrored evolving gender dynamics and social norms. While football was predominantly a male-dominated domain, the increasing visibility of women as spectators, journalists, and participants in surrounding media coverage contributed to a broader cultural awareness. Advertising, commentary, and audience engagement reflected changing expectations, and the broadcast offered glimpses of the tension between tradition and transformation in American society. The program operated at the intersection of entertainment, commerce, and social observation, making it a unique lens through which to view cultural evolution. The reflection of conflict was not limited to broad societal issues. Internal dynamics within the broadcast mirrored similar tensions. Differences in personality, philosophy, and approach created microcosms of negotiation, compromise, and contestation. Cosell's directness and Meredith's charm, for example, created a dynamic that modeled debate, conflict, and reconciliation. The audience witnessed not just athletic performance, but a layered interaction between perspectives, echoing the multiplicity of views within American culture at large. These interpersonal dynamics added depth to the broadcast, reinforcing its role as mirror, mediator, and spectacle simultaneously. The ethical responsibility of the network was further complicated by commercial interests, sponsors, ratings pressure, and the desire to maintain cultural relevance created constraints on content and commentary. Decisions about what to include, emphasize, or avoid reflected not only business priorities, but also judgments about taste, propriety, and societal expectations. The network's struggle to balance honesty with these imperatives illustrated the broader challenges of producing media in a culturally and politically charged environment. Monday Night Football became a case study in negotiating these tensions, demonstrating both the possibilities and limits of televised sports as cultural reflection. The program also engaged viewers in a form of moral and ethical participation. Audiences responded to commentary, debated performances, and formed opinions about the values represented by players, coaches, and broadcasters. The broadcast encouraged reflection on issues such as fairness, equity, and social responsibility, making it a forum in which the cultural climate of the 1970s could be observed and assessed. Viewers were not passive consumers. They were participants in a mediated cultural dialogue, and Monday Night Football became a central site for that engagement. Monday Night Football's reflection of America extended to issues of media ethics, journalistic responsibility, and the role of entertainment in shaping public perception. The program challenged assumptions about what sports broadcasting could be, creating space for analysis, commentary, and critique within a popular and accessible format. By juxtaposing competition with social observation, the broadcast illustrated the ways in which media could influence not only understanding of sports, but broader societal perspectives. The network's navigation of these responsibilities mirrored the growing importance of media as arbiter, interpreter, and amplifier of cultural norms. In many ways, Monday Night Football functioned as a cultural laboratory, testing the capacity of television to reflect, interpret, and influence social reality. Race, war, gender, and media ethics were all visible through the lens of the broadcast. And the program's success demonstrated the appetite for content that engaged viewers on multiple levels. The intertwining of sport, personality, and social commentary created a multidimensional experience that was both entertaining and culturally significant, offering insights into the values, conflicts, and transformations of the era. Ultimately, the show served as America's mirror, revealing both aspiration and tension, excellence and controversy. It reflected the contradictions inherent in a nation negotiating rapid social change, and it amplified the voices and perspectives that shaped public discourse. by presenting sport within a cultural context. Monday Night Football illuminated the broader human and societal drama, demonstrating that television could be more than entertainment. It could be a reflection of the country itself. Monday Night Football was not merely a cultural event or a spectacle. It was a business revolution. The broadcast transformed the economics of professional football, creating a model in which corporate interests, advertising dollars, and media strategy intertwined with the sport itself. The rise of the program coincided with a period of rapid commercialization in American television. But Monday Night Football pushed the boundaries further than any prior venture. Networks recognized the potential to monetize not just games, but the spectacle of football as a form of primetime entertainment. Companies saw an unprecedented opportunity to reach millions of engaged viewers in a concentrated, emotionally charged environment. Before Monday Night Football, advertising around sports was predictable and often limited to print, radio, and sporadic televised spots. Sunday games were accessible to a dedicated but segmented audience, and networks had little leverage to demand high fees or integrate complex marketing strategies. The primetime slot on a Monday evening changed everything. Advertisers could now guarantee exposure to a broad, attentive audience, many of whom had structured their evening routines around the broadcast. This predictability of viewership created leverage that ABC capitalized on aggressively, transforming football into a theater in which commercials were not interruptions, but part of a carefully curated experience. The integration of advertising went beyond simple placement. Sponsors began to influence programming decisions, recognizing that association with the broadcast could enhance brand perception. Network executives negotiated placement, timing, and creative control with a precision previously unseen. The broadcast itself became a platform for showcasing products, sometimes through subtle integration, sometimes through overt sponsorship mentions. These commercial considerations began to shape the tone, pacing, and presentation of the broadcast, blending business imperatives with athletic storytelling. The balance between sport and sponsorship became a defining characteristic of the program, reflecting both opportunity and tension. Corporate influence extended to talent as well. The selection of broadcasters, their personalities, and even their on-air behavior was increasingly informed by the perceived marketability and appeal to sponsors. Howard Cosell's confrontational style, Don Meredith's charm, and Frank Gifford's steadiness were not simply broadcast decisions. They were strategic choices that aligned with ABC's commercial objectives. Personality and performance were commoditized, and the team's ability to engage viewers directly influenced advertising value. Success in the booth was therefore measured not only in ratings, but in the ability to sustain viewer attention in a way that enhanced corporate profitability. Sponsorship also dictated the structure of airtime. The timing of commercial breaks, the emphasis on certain moments within the game, and the presentation of halftime segments were all informed by the objectives of advertisers. Networks negotiated these elements carefully, understanding that the audience's engagement was the currency of revenue. The broadcast became a symbiotic relationship. Viewers received entertainment and analysis, while advertisers reached a captive, emotionally invested audience. The interdependence of sport, media, and commerce was made explicit in ways that had rarely been attempted before. The monetization of Monday Night Football extended to the league itself. The NFL recognized the value of national exposure, and broadcasting rights became increasingly lucrative. Television revenues began to dominate league income, influencing decisions about scheduling, team promotion, and player contracts. The financial stakes raised the bar for performance, accountability, and innovation, both on and off the field. Monday nights were no longer simply games. They were revenue generators, marketing tools, and cultural events whose financial implications extended across the league and network infrastructure. Advertisers also learned to leverage the emotional intensity of the broadcast. Football, with its suspense, drama, and larger-than-life personalities, created ideal conditions for memorable campaigns. Commercials were timed to coincide with moments of heightened excitement, and narratives were constructed to resonate with the emotional engagement of viewers. This strategic alignment of content and commerce reflected a sophisticated understanding of human attention and behavior, and it reshaped the expectations of advertising in televised sports. The interplay between athletic performance and commercial presentation became a defining feature of the program's business model. The corporate influence of Monday Night Football had wider ramifications for television as an industry. Networks realized that successful sports programming could dictate primetime schedules, shape viewing habits, and drive revenue in ways that traditional entertainment programming could not. The success of ABC's venture encouraged competitors to invest more heavily in sports broadcasting, accelerating the commercialization of television and solidifying sports as a central component of network strategy. The alignment of advertising, production, and athletic performance demonstrated a new paradigm, one in which cultural, social, and economic forces converged in the primetime broadcast. The pressure of balancing sport and sponsorship also had cultural implications. The program's commercial imperatives sometimes collided with journalistic or athletic priorities. Decisions about what stories to highlight, which commentary to emphasize, and how to present the game were influenced by commercial considerations. While the broadcast maintained its integrity as a sporting event, the presence of corporate influence was inescapable, subtly shaping narratives and framing audience perception. This dynamic reflected a broader tension in American culture, where commerce and authenticity frequently intersected in complex and sometimes uncomfortable ways. Monday Night Football also changed the relationship between viewers and the sport. Fans were now consuming not just games, but an orchestrated experience designed to entertain, inform, and engage. Commercial messaging became embedded within the viewing experience, and audiences developed an expectation of both sport and spectacle. Ratings success reinforced this model, encouraging networks to continue innovating, integrating, and monetizing every aspect of the broadcast. The program demonstrated that commercial strategy could be as essential to the viewer experience as the game itself. The economic engine of Monday Night Football contributed to the professionalization of both broadcasting and league operations. Talent management, production design, marketing, and scheduling all became highly strategic endeavors, influenced by the pursuit of maximum revenue and audience engagement. The stakes for failure were high. A mismanaged broadcast could affect ratings, sponsorship deals, and the reputations of both network and league. This environment of high stakes fostered innovation, creativity, and competition, ensuring that each broadcast would be executed with precision and ambition. Sponsorship decisions also shaped the content and style of the broadcast. Advertisers influenced visual presentation, segment length, and the emphasis on narrative drama. The interdependence of commercial success and program quality created a feedback loop in which each enhanced the other. Viewers were drawn to compelling storytelling, and advertisers capitalized on the audience's investment in characters, rivalries, and outcomes. The relationship between entertainment and commerce became inseparable, illustrating the sophisticated integration of economic strategy and cultural production. The business implications extended to the perception of football as a national institution. Monday Night Football demonstrated that the sport could be a reliable platform for revenue generation, cultural influence, and corporate engagement. The program's success validated the investment of networks, advertisers, and sponsors, while shaping the strategies of other leagues and broadcast ventures. Football had evolved into an economic engine, its influence extending far beyond the field into boardrooms, marketing departments, and living rooms nationwide. Corporate influence also altered the expectations of broadcasters and athletes. Performance, marketability, and visibility became intertwined with financial considerations. Broadcasters were expected to deliver not only analysis, but entertainment that sustained viewer engagement. Players were increasingly aware of the public exposure and its impact on contracts, endorsements, and reputation. The interconnection of sport, media, and business created a complex ecosystem in which each component influenced the others. amplifying both opportunity and pressure. Ultimately, the rise of Monday Night Football as a business machine illustrated the convergence of sport, media, and commerce. Advertising dictated airtime, influenced tone, and shaped talent decisions. Networks and sponsors collaborated to craft a program that maximized engagement and revenue. The show's success demonstrated that primetime football was not only a cultural phenomenon, but a highly effective economic model. One that would redefine the relationship between sports, television, and corporate America for decades to come. The broadcast's integration of entertainment, athletic performance, and commercial strategy created a blueprint for future programming. The lessons learned about audience engagement, brand alignment, and revenue generation shaped network decision-making, corporate sponsorship, and the broader sports media landscape. Monday Night Football became a case study in how business imperatives could drive innovation, influence content, and amplify cultural impact. In conclusion, the success of Monday Night Football was inseparable from its economic structure. Advertising and sponsorship were not peripheral elements. They were integral to the program's identity, operations, and influence. The balance between sport and commerce defined the broadcast's tone, guided talent decisions, and shaped the viewing experience. Monday Night Football proved that professional football could be transformed into a business machine without losing its cultural and entertainment value. It demonstrated the power of television to integrate multiple imperatives, sport, spectacle, and commerce, into a singular, enduring phenomenon. Roone Arledge was not just a television executive, he was a visionary who reshaped the very nature of sports broadcasting. By the mid-1970s, his influence at ABC Sports had grown to unprecedented levels. And Monday Night Football was the crown jewel of his empire. The success of the broadcast elevated the network to a dominant position in sports programming, creating both cultural impact and internal tension. Arledge's approach combined ambition, intuition, and a willingness to challenge established norms, resulting in a transformation of television philosophy that reverberated far beyond football. At the heart of Arledge's power was a profound understanding of audience psychology. He recognized that viewers were not just passive observers. They were participants in the drama, seeking emotional engagement, narrative coherence, and human connection. The structure of Monday Night Football reflected this insight. Arledge did not merely present a game. He presented a story, carefully crafted to maximize suspense, highlight personalities, and evoke empathy. Every camera angle, every commentary decision, every pacing choice was informed by this philosophy. The broadcast was designed to draw viewers into the action, to make them care not only about the outcome, but about the characters and the conflicts that unfolded on and off the field. Arledge's vision was both inspiring and intimidating to those around him. The broadcast team operated under immense pressure to meet his exacting standards. Howard Cosell, Don Meredith, Frank Gifford, and the production staff were all aware that they were part of a carefully orchestrated enterprise. The dynamic between talent and executive became a defining feature of the program. Creative freedom existed within parameters established by Arledge's strategic objectives, and deviations from his vision were met with scrutiny. While this approach ensured consistency and quality, it also fostered tension and occasional resentment among those who valued autonomy. The internal culture of ABC Sports reflected Arledge's personality and philosophy. He demanded precision, innovation, and engagement while maintaining strict control over key decisions. Production meetings were rigorous, with a focus on aligning messaging, narrative structure, and presentation style. Every element of the broadcast from pre-game commentary to halftime features was subjected to careful analysis and adjustment. This centralized control allowed Arledge to maintain a coherent vision across broadcasts, ensuring that Monday Night Football not only entertained, but also elevated ABC's status within the competitive television landscape. Arledge's empire was not without its critics. Some viewed his methods as overly controlling, even arrogant. The perception of dominance within the network sometimes created friction among colleagues who felt their contributions were subordinated to executive oversight. These power struggles, while largely hidden from the public, influenced the tone and operations of the broadcast. Negotiating these dynamics required political acumen, interpersonal skill, and the ability to maintain morale while asserting authority. Arledge's success depended not only on creative vision, but on his capacity to manage people, personalities, and institutional structures effectively. The transformation of television philosophy under Arledge extended beyond Monday Night Football. He applied lessons from sports broadcasting to other forms of live television, emphasizing narrative, pacing, and emotional resonance. His approach blurred the lines between journalism and entertainment, creating a model in which storytelling was central to viewer engagement. The techniques honed in football broadcasts, multiple camera angles, dynamic graphics, human interest features became standard across sports and other live programming. Arledge's influence fundamentally altered expectations for how television could inform, entertain, and captivate audiences. Central to Arledge's philosophy was the cultivation of personalities. He understood that viewers connected with individuals, not just events. Broadcasters were not merely narrators of action, they were characters in an ongoing drama, and their interactions, conflicts, and chemistry were part of the narrative appeal. This emphasis on personality elevated Cosell, Meredith, and Gifford to cultural prominence, making them integral to the program's identity. Arledge's manipulation of on-air dynamics was both strategic and artistic, reflecting a belief that human drama was as compelling as athletic competition. Arledge's dominance also influenced the broader network landscape. ABC's competitors observed the success of Monday Night Football and attempted to emulate elements of its formula. Roone's combination of spectacle, narrative, and personality set a new standard for sports broadcasting, challenging traditional models and raising the bar for production quality. His empire demonstrated that television could be both commercially viable and culturally impactful, merging art, entertainment, and business in ways that had rarely been attempted. Behind the scenes, Arledge navigated complex relationships with network executives, advertisers, league officials, and talent. Each group had distinct priorities, and balancing these interests required strategic insight. Advertisers demanded exposure and engagement. League officials sought favorable representation, and talent desired respect and autonomy. Arledge's capacity to manage these intersecting demands reinforced his power and influence, but it also contributed to the intensity of the work environment. The empire he built was sustained by constant negotiation, foresight, and an unwavering commitment to his vision. The consequences of Arledge's approach were evident in the quality and consistency of Monday Night Football. Ratings soared, cultural impact intensified, and ABC established itself as the preeminent network for sports entertainment. The program became a template for the integration of storytelling, performance, and technical innovation, setting standards that competitors and successors would emulate for decades. The success of the empire underscored the value of centralization, control, and a clear philosophical framework, demonstrating that leadership could shape not only operations, but the cultural meaning of a broadcast. Arledge's influence extended to the moral and ethical dimensions of the broadcast. Decisions about which stories to emphasize, how to present controversial events, and when to challenge conventional norms reflected both his creative vision and his understanding of the network's societal responsibility. The balance between engagement and accountability was delicate, and Arledge's choices shaped not only audience perception, but broader discussions about media ethics, fairness, and representation. The empire he built was not merely operational. It was cultural, influencing public consciousness as much as it shaped television practice. The transformation of television philosophy under Arledge also required innovation in production techniques. He prioritized multi-camera coverage, dynamic angles, and rapid editing to create a sense of immediacy and intensity. This approach emphasized storytelling, highlighting not just the outcome of plays, but the human drama surrounding each moment. The techniques developed under his direction became industry standards, influencing sports broadcasting worldwide. Arledge's empire was defined as much by technical ingenuity as by strategic vision, blending artistry and commerce in ways that elevated television's cultural role. Arledge's strategic acumen was matched by his ability to anticipate cultural trends. He recognized shifts in audience expectation, social behavior, and media consumption, and he adapted programming accordingly. The empire he constructed was responsive, flexible, and forward-looking, capable of sustaining relevance in a rapidly evolving cultural landscape. By integrating audience insight, technological innovation, and creative vision, Arledge ensured that Monday Night Football remained both influential and commercially successful. The power struggles within the network also highlight the human cost of dominance. Arledge's assertive style, while effective, required colleagues and talent to operate under high levels of scrutiny and expectation. Mistakes were magnified, and creative disagreements could become intense. Navigating this environment demanded resilience, diplomacy, and a capacity to thrive under pressure. The success of the empire was inseparable from the personal and professional demands it imposed on those who contributed to its operation. Ultimately, Roone Arledge's empire exemplified the convergence of vision, control, and innovation. ABC Sports' dominance in the 1970s was both a product of creative brilliance and strategic execution. Arledge transformed not only Monday Night Football, but the philosophy of television itself, integrating narrative, personality, and technical innovation in ways that would define the medium for decades. The empire he built was a testament to ambition, insight, and the transformative potential of visionary leadership. The rise of Monday Night Football coincided with a technological revolution that transformed how audiences experienced professional football. The game was no longer confined to the field. It became an orchestrated performance captured through lenses, transmitted across airwaves, and reconstructed in living rooms across the country. Television itself became a participant, shaping perception, emphasizing drama, and creating a sense of immediacy that elevated the sport beyond its traditional boundaries. Every innovation in camera work, replay, and graphics contributed to a new language of storytelling, one that fundamentally altered the relationship between the game and its audience. Before Monday Night Football, sports broadcasts were largely functional. The camera followed the action, and announcers described it in real time. There was little attention paid to narrative structure, emotional emphasis, or viewer immersion. Roone Arledge recognized that this approach limited engagement. He envisioned a broadcast in which technology could amplify drama, heighten suspense, and make viewers feel as though they were part of the event. To achieve this, ABC invested in multiple cameras, including aerial views, sideline angles, and close-ups that captured both athletic skill and human emotion. These angles allowed viewers to see the game from perspectives previously reserved for those physically present, transforming football into a more cinematic experience. Instant replay, which had been introduced in the early 1960s, took on new significance in the Monday Night Football era. The broadcast utilized replays not simply to clarify controversial plays, but to craft narrative tension. A quarterback's decision, a receiver's catch, or a defensive stop could be replayed from multiple angles, accompanied by commentary that emphasized strategic insight or emotional stakes. This layering of technology and storytelling created a heightened sense of drama, allowing viewers to appreciate both the athletic execution and the narrative significance of each play. Replays became a tool for storytelling, transforming routine moments into points of suspense and reflection. Graphics and on-screen data further enhanced the storytelling potential of broadcasts. Yard markers, statistical overlays, and strategic diagrams allowed audiences to engage analytically as well as emotionally. Viewers could understand not only what was happening, but why it mattered. These visual elements enabled commentators to articulate complex strategies in accessible ways, bridging the gap between casual fans and seasoned observers. Technology became a means of democratizing understanding, allowing millions of viewers to follow the game with a depth of insight previously unavailable outside stadiums. Camera placement was also strategic in shaping narrative focus. Close-ups on players' faces captured emotion, frustration, elation, determination, while sideline cameras highlighted coaching intensity and sideline dynamics. Crowd shots emphasized atmosphere, creating a sense of collective investment and energy. These choices reinforce the broadcast's dual role as both athletic documentation and theatrical presentation. Viewers were not merely watching a game. They were experiencing a story composed of action, emotion, and spectacle. The technology itself became a character, influencing perception and interpretation. The integration of technology transformed the role of the broadcaster. Announcers were no longer simple narrators. They became interpreters, guiding audiences through the interplay of strategy, emotion, and spectacle. Commentary could be paired with replays, graphics, and camera angles to provide context, insight, and emotional resonance. Broadcasters like Howard Cosell and Frank Gifford leveraged these tools to create a dialogue with the audience, interpreting not only what happened, but its broader significance within the game and culture. Television technology empowered them to expand the narrative scope of sports commentary. The technological revolution also altered audience expectations. Viewers became accustomed to detailed analysis, dynamic visuals, and immersive experiences. The demand for this level of production influenced the entire industry, setting new standards for how sports were presented. Competitors and networks sought to emulate the success of Monday Night Football, investing in camera technology, instant replay capabilities, and graphic systems. The broadcast demonstrated that innovation in technology could enhance both entertainment value and audience engagement, reshaping the economics and culture of sports media. Television became a participant in the game, influencing perception of momentum, significance, and spectacle. Close-up shots of a quarterback's reaction after a fumble, a coach's intensity on the sidelines, or the celebration of a touchdown were all choices made by producers, shaping how viewers interpreted events. The medium highlighted some aspects of the game while minimizing others, guiding emotional response and narrative understanding. In this sense, the camera was not neutral. It was an active agent in storytelling, mediating the experience of football and amplifying the drama inherent in competition. Technical innovation also facilitated the growth of storytelling beyond the live event. Pre-game features, halftime specials, and post-game analysis leveraged video footage, graphics, and interviews to create a cohesive narrative around each broadcast. Players' backgrounds, rivalries, and personal stories were woven into the coverage, contextualizing athletic performance within a larger human drama. The broadcast became multidimensional, combining play-by-play, analysis, and narrative arcs in ways that television alone could deliver. Technology enabled this fusion, allowing for a richer, more compelling viewer experience. The innovations developed for Monday Night Football also influenced coaching, player preparation, and league strategy. The awareness that games were being broadcast to millions of viewers with high quality coverage increased pressure on performance. Plays, decisions, and strategies were scrutinized in detail, both during broadcasts and in subsequent analysis. The technological capacity to capture, replay, and dissect every action contributed to an environment in which athletes and coaches had to adapt to heightened visibility, reinforcing the interplay between media and sport. Cinematically, the broadcast transformed the presentation of football into a narrative spectacle. By varying angles, using slow-motion replays, and emphasizing player expressions, producers created a sense of tension, rhythm, and pacing that rivaled scripted entertainment. Moments that might have been overlooked in a live stadium became central to the television experience. The game was elevated, both artistically and narratively, through deliberate technological design, enhancing the audience's emotional connection and investment. The impact of these innovations extended beyond Monday Night Football. Sports broadcasting across all leagues and networks adopted similar approaches, integrating multi-angle coverage, replay analysis, and graphic overlays. The principles developed under Arledge's leadership became industry standards, shaping how audiences would consume sports for decades. Television's role as mediator, interpreter, and participant was firmly established, creating expectations that remain fundamental to modern sports storytelling. In essence, the technology revolution redefined the relationship between football and its audience. The game itself remained constant in its rules and athletic challenge, but the way it was experienced, understood, and interpreted was transformed. Television became an active agent, shaping perception, emphasizing drama, and constructing narrative arcs that amplified both excitement and engagement. The broadcast elevated Monday Night Football from a sporting event to a cultural phenomenon, illustrating the power of technology to enhance storytelling, deepen audience connection, and create enduring impact. The combination of camera innovation, instant replay, and graphics laid the foundation for a new era in sports broadcasting. Television was no longer a passive medium, but an active participant in the drama of the game. Viewers were drawn into the action, emotionally and analytically engaged, experiencing football in ways that had never been possible. These advancements set the stage for future generations of broadcasts, cementing Monday Night Football's legacy as a pioneer in sports media innovation. Ultimately, the technology revolution ensured that Monday Night Football was more than a game. It was an orchestrated narrative, a blend of athleticism, human emotion, and mediated storytelling. The innovations in camera work, replay, and graphics allowed viewers to experience the sport in a way that was immersive, informative, and emotionally compelling. Television became the real player on the field, guiding perception, enhancing drama, and elevating football into a spectacle that captured the imagination of a nation. From the very first broadcast, Monday Night Football faced scrutiny from those who feared that television was corrupting the sport they loved. Traditionalists, coaches, former players, journalists, and lifelong fans viewed the primetime spectacle with suspicion, seeing it as a commercialized distortion of football's integrity. They argued that the game had been transformed from a competition rooted in athletic skill, strategy, and tradition into a product designed to entertain, provoke emotion, and generate advertising revenue. For purists, the lights, the commentary, theatrics, and the nationwide audience were distractions that threatened the essential character of the sport. Criticism often centered on the broadcast's emphasis on personalities over play. The presence of Howard Cosell, Don Meredith, and Frank Gifford in the booth was celebrated by some but reviled by others. Critics argued that the focus on individual commentary, celebrity culture, and dramatic interplay diluted attention from the athletes and strategic complexities on the field. "It's become more theater than sport," wrote one prominent sports columnist in 1971. For purists, football was meant to be observed in its raw, unscripted form, not mediated through a lens designed to amplify spectacle. They feared that the emotional manipulation of viewers might compromise the integrity of the game itself. The term sports entertainment emerged in these early critiques, reflecting a growing divide between traditional journalism and broadcast spectacle. Critics contended that Arledge's approach emphasized drama over analysis, creating a tension between factual reporting and theatrical presentation. The argument was that while Monday Night Football drew unprecedented audiences, it did so at the cost of serious coverage and respect for the craft of the game. Every camera angle, slow motion, replay, and emphasis on narrative was viewed by some as a commercial compromise, transforming athletes into actors and games into performances. Resistance was particularly strong among former players and coaches who valued the purity of competition. They argued that the spectacle distracted athletes and audiences alike, encouraging superficiality over substance. In interviews, some veterans described frustration with the constant media scrutiny and the pressure to perform not only on the field but for national broadcast consumption. The spectacle of Monday Night Football imposed expectations that extended beyond competition, intertwining personal performance with public image in ways that traditionalists found alienating. Journalists also voiced concern over the blending of commentary and showmanship. While some recognized the skill of broadcasters like Cosell in engaging audiences, others saw a blurring of lines between objective analysis and entertainment. Columns, editorials, and media critiques questioned whether the program prioritized ratings and emotion over factual reporting, accuracy, and professional standards. Critics warned that the broadcast could redefine public perception of football, shaping understanding not through education or analysis, but through dramatized spectacle. At the heart of these debates was the question of purpose. For purists, football existed first and foremost as a sport, a test of skill, strategy, and endurance. Television, in this view, should serve as a medium for documentation, analysis, and dissemination, not as a tool to manipulate, entertain, or commercialize. Monday Night Football, by prioritizing audience engagement, celebrity dynamics, and theatrical presentation, challenged this principle. The broadcast's unprecedented ratings and cultural influence amplified the tension, as the success of the program made it increasingly difficult to ignore or dismiss. Criticism extended to the influence of corporate interests. Advertisers, sponsors, and network executives played a central role in shaping broadcast decisions, from camera angles to segment timing. Purists argued that these commercial considerations risked compromising journalistic integrity, placing profit above the authentic representation of the sport. The broadcast's careful orchestration of suspense, human drama, and spectacle was seen as a calculated strategy to maximize viewership, sometimes at the expense of the athletes and the game's integrity. Despite these critiques, Monday Night Football continued to grow in popularity, creating a paradox at the heart of the debate. The very elements that alarmed purist drama, personality, technological innovation, were the same elements that captivated millions of viewers. Ratings soared, advertisers invested heavily, and the program became a defining feature of American culture. The tension between purity and popularity became a defining characteristic of the broadcast, highlighting the broader cultural negotiation between tradition and modernity, substance and spectacle, analysis and entertainment. The critics' concerns were not entirely unfounded. The pressures of prime-time exposure influenced player behavior, media interactions, and even coaching decisions. Athletes were aware of the national spotlight, and the stakes of performance extended beyond victory or defeat into public perception and career trajectory. The broadcast's emphasis on emotional engagement, dramatization, and narrative framing created a new dynamic in which every play, reaction, and personal moment could be amplified, scrutinized, and interpreted. Television was no longer neutral. It had become a participant in the cultural and emotional stakes of the game. Debates about the purity of the sport also intersected with broader societal concerns. The late 1960s and 1970s were periods of cultural upheaval, with shifting norms around media consumption, celebrity culture, and the commercialization of public life. Monday Night Football became a microcosm of these tensions, reflecting both the possibilities and risks of media influence. Critics feared that the commodification of football could erode the integrity not only of the sport, but of American cultural values surrounding competition, merit, and fairness. At the same time, defenders of the broadcast emphasized its role in popularizing the sport and expanding its audience. They argued that Monday Night Football brought football into homes across the nation, creating shared experiences and cultural rituals that strengthened fan engagement. The spectacle and personalities, while criticized, were also seen as a vehicle for storytelling, emotional connection, and the democratization of access. Without these innovations, the NFL might have remained confined to Sunday afternoons, limiting its reach and cultural impact. The debate between critics and supporters highlighted a fundamental tension inherent in mass media: the negotiation between authenticity and engagement. Monday Night Football embodied this tension, operating as both sport and theater, journalism and entertainment. It provoked questions about the purpose of televised sports, the role of corporate influence, and the responsibilities of broadcasters to preserve integrity while maximizing audience interest. These debates shaped public discourse, influencing how viewers understood not only football, but the role of television in society. The critiques also underscored the transformative power of Monday Night Football. The program forced Americans to reconsider their relationship with sports, media, and entertainment. It challenged assumptions about objectivity, tradition, and audience expectation, raising awareness of the ways in which television could shape perception, narrative, and cultural norms. Even as purists lamented the loss of traditionalism, the broadcast expanded the possibilities of storytelling, technological innovation, and emotional engagement. Ultimately, the critics and purists were part of a dialogue that defined the cultural impact of Monday Night Football. Their resistance highlighted the risks and responsibilities inherent in televising a sport at scale, while their debates clarified the boundaries between sport, entertainment, and commerce. The tension between purity and popularity became a lens through which to understand the broader evolution of professional football, the role of media, and the emergence of a new cultural paradigm in which spectacle and sport were inseparably intertwined. In this context, Monday Night Football was both a triumph and a provocation. It succeeded in capturing the nation's attention, shaping the rhythm of American life, and elevating the medium of television. At the same time, it provoked reflection and debate, reminding audiences and insiders alike that the pursuit of engagement and spectacle carried consequences for the integrity, perception, and meaning of the sport. Monday Night Football was no longer just a domestic phenomenon. As the 1970s progressed, the reach of the broadcast began to stretch beyond the borders of the United States, carrying with it the sounds, spectacle, and ethos of American football into foreign living rooms. The flicker of the television screen became a conduit through which culture, commerce, and narrative traveled, offering international audiences a lens into American life, values, and entertainment. What began as an experiment in primetime scheduling had become a cultural export, a signal broadcast across the world that simultaneously reflected and reshaped the identity of the sport. The expansion overseas was gradual, initially targeting North America and parts of Europe. Cable and satellite technology allowed American networks to transmit Monday Night Football to audiences who had little prior exposure to the game. For many, this was their first encounter with the spectacle of American sports under the lights. The broadcast introduced viewers to not only the rules and strategy of football, but to the rituals, personalities, and drama that had been carefully constructed for domestic audiences. Fans abroad were captivated by the energy of the stadiums, the intensity of competition, and the charisma of commentators, all of which painted a picture of football as a uniquely American phenomenon. The globalization of Monday Night Football highlighted the power of media as a cultural vector. Television did not merely show the game, it transmitted values, aesthetics, and narratives. The spectacle of broadcast football offered international audiences a curated vision of America: competitive, ambitious, technologically advanced, and deeply invested in entertainment. The stadiums, cheerleaders, halftime shows, and commentary created a distinctive tableau, providing both fascination and aspiration for viewers abroad. The NFL, perhaps unintentionally, became a vehicle for soft power, exporting elements of American culture while cultivating interest in the sport itself. This global expansion also revealed the NFL's emerging understanding of its potential as a commercial and cultural entity. The league recognized that Monday Night Football could serve not only as a broadcast event, but as a platform for expanding the fan base, selling merchandise, and establishing an international presence. Licensing deals, foreign broadcasts, and marketing initiatives became increasingly sophisticated, signaling a shift in the league's strategic vision. Football was no longer confined to a domestic pastime. It was becoming a global product with international implications for branding, sponsorship, and cultural influence. International reception varied. In some countries, audiences were enthralled, embracing the spectacle and quickly adopting American football terminology, statistics, and fandom rituals. In others, viewers were intrigued by the production values and personalities, but struggled to fully grasp the nuances of the game. Regardless, Monday Night Football created a shared reference point, a cultural signal that introduced millions of people to American media sensibilities. The broadcast became a teacher, an ambassador, and a spectacle all at once, shaping perception and cultural awareness simultaneously. The export of Monday Night Football also underscored the interplay between media and identity. American football was presented as a mirror of societal values, competition, determination, showmanship, and commercial ambition. International audiences experienced not only the mechanics of the sport, but the cultural context that surrounded it. Commentators' analysis, dramatization, and narrative framing conveyed implicit lessons about American priorities, work ethic, and celebrity. The NFL's brand and ethos were inseparable from the spectacle of the broadcast, reinforcing the idea that media could shape cultural understanding as much as entertain. For the NFL, this period marked a critical turning point. The league began to appreciate the strategic importance of international outreach. Sunday games had historically been the domain of local and regional audiences, with national broadcasts limited to certain time slots and geographic areas. Monday Night Football, however, created a platform for global visibility. The timing, production quality, and narrative construction of the broadcasts made them appealing beyond domestic viewers. And the league saw the opportunity to cultivate new markets, expand revenue streams, and reinforce brand prestige. Television was no longer simply a distribution channel. It had become a lever of cultural and commercial influence. The expansion overseas also catalyzed innovations in broadcasting techniques. Networks began to adjust commentary, camera work, and graphics to accommodate audiences who were less familiar with the rules and context of the game. Explanatory segments, slower pacing, and additional statistics were introduced to ensure that international viewers could follow the action. This necessitated a balance between maintaining the drama and narrative appeal of Monday Night Football, while also providing clarity and context. The evolution of broadcast strategy in response to international audiences demonstrated the flexibility and adaptability of the production team under Arledge's leadership. Global exposure heightened the stakes for NFL players and commentators. Athletes were no longer performing for local or national audiences alone. Their actions, decisions, and personal narratives were now observed worldwide. This intensified the pressure to perform, to embody professionalism and charisma, and to contribute to a product that was simultaneously a game and a cultural export. Broadcasters, too, carried the responsibility of representing both the league and American media standards on an international stage, mediating cultural translation and maintaining the drama that had become the hallmark of Monday Night Football. The reception of Monday Night Football abroad also revealed the universality of narrative engagement. While the rules of football were unfamiliar to many viewers, the human drama triumph, failure, rivalry, emotion resonated across cultural boundaries. The game's narrative arcs, the personalities in the booth, and the tension of competition transcended linguistic and geographic barriers. In this sense, Monday Night Football was successful not simply as a sport, but as a storytelling medium, one that conveyed meaning, suspense, and excitement independent of prior knowledge or cultural context. Merchandising and marketing followed the expansion. The NFL capitalized on the increased visibility by licensing apparel, memorabilia, and other products for international distribution. The broadcast was no longer only an entertainment experience. It became a driver of economic activity, brand recognition, and cultural engagement. The league's awareness of this global potential foreshadowed the contemporary internationalization of American sports, including overseas games, localized fan engagement, and strategic partnerships with foreign media outlets. Monday Night Football had laid the groundwork for the league's international ambitions. Perhaps most importantly, the broadcast demonstrated the cultural power of American media. Monday Night Football conveyed not only sport, but a version of America itself: competitive, media-savvy, technologically adept, and invested in spectacle. International audiences received a narrative about the nation, its values, and its priorities. In this sense, the NFL became a cultural emissary, and Monday Night Football the vehicle of transmission. Television transformed from a passive recording tool into a channel of cultural export, shaping perceptions, aspirations, and understanding on a global scale. The global signal of Monday Night Football ultimately reinforced the league's awareness that the sport had evolved beyond its original parameters. It was no longer merely a competitive contest played in stadiums. It was a mediated experience, a cultural event, and a commercial enterprise with worldwide resonance. The game's reach extended into homes, communities, and markets that had previously been inaccessible, altering both perception and participation. The NFL began to see itself not only as a league, but as a brand and cultural force, and Monday Night Football was the instrument through which this transformation was realized. The broadcast's international impact also intensified the dialogue between innovation and tradition. While the spectacle appealed to new audiences, purists worried that the focus on entertainment over competition was further amplified by global exposure. The stakes were now higher. The world was watching, and every decision, comment, and production choice contributed to the perception of American football abroad. The tension between authenticity and spectacle was no longer a domestic debate. It was a question of global representation and cultural identity. Monday Night Football's export reinforced the transformative power of television as both medium and message. It demonstrated that a broadcast could carry not only entertainment, but values, identity, and influence across borders. The NFL realized that the stakes of success were now international, that the consequences of production choices extended far beyond domestic ratings, and that the game had become a tool of cultural transmission. Television was no longer a window onto the sport. It had become a stage, an agent, and a symbol. Ultimately, the global signal of Monday Night Football revealed that the league had entered a new era. The sport was now both local and international, both competition and spectacle, both game and narrative. Television, technology, and storytelling had transformed the NFL into a cultural force with worldwide reach. Monday Night Football was no longer just a program. It was a statement, a transmission, and a phenomenon that carried the rhythms, ambitions, and identity of American football into the consciousness of the world. The first decade of Monday Night Football was defined not only by innovation and spectacle, but by the personalities who gave the broadcast its heartbeat. Howard Cosell, Don Meredith, and Frank Gifford were not just commentators. They were architects of a cultural phenomenon. They brought drama, humor, insight, and controversy to millions of homes. They transformed the way audiences understood and experienced football. Yet as the years progressed, the very intensity that had fueled their brilliance began to exact a toll. Fatigue, pressure, and the relentless demands of primetime television marked the beginning of a slow, inexorable decline. Don Meredith, the former Dallas Cowboys quarterback, had been the soul of the broadcast. His humor, charm, and relatability created a bridge between the audience and the spectacle. Meredith's lighthearted commentary and candid reflections humanized the game and counterbalanced Cosell's acerbic analysis. He became a national figure, not because he was an announcer, but because he brought authenticity, warmth, and unpredictability to a production designed for mass consumption. Yet behind the laughter and charm was the strain of maintaining energy week after week in a high-stakes environment. By the late 1970s, the novelty that had defined Meredith's presence began to wear thin. The hours were long, the preparation intense, and the expectation to perform consistently before millions became exhausting. Howard Cosell, the provocateur and critic, faced a different set of pressures. His acerbic brilliance, the cornerstone of Monday Night Football's cultural resonance, demanded constant vigilance and mental intensity. Cosell's commentary often went beyond the game itself, touching on social issues, controversial player behavior, and the politics of sports. While this earned him admiration from some quarters, it also placed him under scrutiny from network executives. advertisers, and audiences who were sometimes uncomfortable with his candor. The emotional labor of balancing honesty, entertainment, and responsibility became overwhelming. Burnout crept in, manifesting in moments of tension, frustration, and increasingly public conflict with colleagues and management. Frank Gifford, who replaced Keith Jackson in the booth, carried the weight of professionalism and consistency. Gifford's calm and authoritative presence anchored the broadcast, but he too was subject to the cumulative stress of primetime exposure. The expectation to deliver insight, maintain on-air chemistry, and navigate the personalities of Cosell and Meredith was constant. Gifford's role demanded both diplomacy and assertiveness, requiring an emotional labor that was invisible to the audience but critical to the program's cohesion. Even with his steadiness, the cumulative pressures of weekly broadcasts over more than a decade left their mark on the pioneers. The internal fatigue of the original cast was compounded by external pressures. Ratings remained paramount. Networks scrutinized every performance, and advertisers demanded consistency and impact. Every broadcast was a public event with high stakes, and the personalities of the commentators were inseparable from the show's identity. The success of Monday Night Football had created an environment in which the booth became a stage, the game a script, and the broadcasters both performers and public figures. The intensity of this dual-role journalist and entertainer, analyst and actor, was unsustainable over time. Meredith's departure from the broadcast was a turning point. His absence highlighted the emotional and creative toll of sustaining such a high-profile role. The humor, spontaneity, and relatability that had defined the early years were diminished. Audiences noticed the shift, as did colleagues who had relied on his presence to balance Cosell's intensity and Gifford's composure. Meredith's exit was not simply a personnel change. It was a signal of the end of an era, an acknowledgement that the pioneers who had defined Monday Night Football could not maintain the pace indefinitely. Cosell, too, struggled with the demands of primetime television. His health, relationships, and personal life were all affected by the relentless schedule and public scrutiny. The very qualities that had made him a cultural icon, the intelligence, the candor, the willingness to provoke debate, so made him vulnerable to exhaustion. Cosell's clashes with network executives and colleagues intensified as he sought to maintain integrity and influence in a broadcast increasingly dominated by commercial considerations. The stress of balancing his own principles with the expectations of an evolving media landscape eroded his capacity for sustained engagement. The decline of the original cast was also emblematic of broader changes within Monday Night Football. As the 1980s approached, the broadcast evolved in response to shifting audience expectations, technological advancements, and corporate priorities. The intense personalities who had defined the early years could not entirely adapt to these changes. The dynamic that had created a cultural phenomenon began to fray, replaced gradually by new voices, production strategies, and a focus on broader marketability. The human cost of innovation became evident. The pioneers who had built the broadcast were subject to the very pressures that had been engineered to create its success. Emotional unraveling manifested in several ways. Conflicts between colleagues, moments of on-air tension, and public disagreements reflected the stress of sustaining creativity and authenticity under the microscope of primetime television. Private struggles, health concerns, burnout, and fatigue were often invisible to audiences, but deeply affected the broadcast. The personalities who had once driven energy and cultural resonance were now vulnerable to the pressures of expectation, a reminder that even national icons were human. The decline of Meredith and Cosell, in particular, marked a turning point in the identity of Monday Night Football. Their absence and diminishing influence created space for new approaches, altering the tone, humor, and narrative of the broadcast. While ratings and spectacle continued, the emotional core that had captivated audiences in the early years was changed. Viewers sensed the shift as the intimate chemistry and human immediacy of the original team gave way to a more structured, polished, and commercially driven production. This period also revealed the fragility of televised sports as a cultural institution dependent on individual charisma. While technology, production, and innovation had elevated football to a spectacle, the human element remained essential.
Commentators
Were not interchangeable. Their presence, perspective, and emotional resonance shaped perception, interpretation, and engagement. The decline of the original cast underscored the importance of these individuals in constructing the mythos of Monday Night Football and highlighted the consequences of sustaining innovation without regard for human endurance. Ultimately, the decline of the originals was both inevitable and instructive. It reflected the costs of pioneering a new form of media, the strain of maintaining personal integrity under commercial pressure, and the emotional weight of shaping a national institution. Meredith, Cosell, and Gifford were extraordinary figures whose contributions transformed football, broadcasting, and culture. Yet even their talent, charisma, and commitment could not fully withstand the relentless demands of primetime television, commercialization, and audience expectation. Their unraveling marked the end of an era, a moment in which the human limits of innovation became visible against the backdrop of a cultural revolution. Monday Night Football would continue, evolving with new personalities, production techniques, and technological innovations. But the emotional resonance, charm, and unpredictability of the original broadcast team were unmatched. The legacy of these pioneers was both celebrated and mourned, reminding audiences and the industry that innovation comes at a cost. The human toll was the price of spectacle, and the decline of the originals served as a cautionary tale about the intersection of creativity, commerce, and endurance. In the end, the unraveling of Meredith and Cosell revealed the paradox of Monday Night Football. The very qualities that made the broadcast revolutionary personality. Drama and authenticity were also the qualities most vulnerable to fatigue, scrutiny, and time. The decline of the originals was not a failure. It was the natural consequence of pushing boundaries, reshaping a cultural institution, and placing extraordinary demands on extraordinary people. Their departure left a void that would shape the evolution of the broadcast for decades. A reminder that the human element was as central to football's story as the game itself. As the 1980s dawned, the landscape of television and sports was undergoing a seismic shift. Cable networks were proliferating, offering viewers unprecedented choices and fragmenting audiences that had once been unified under the bright lights of Monday Night Football. The NFL was no longer the sole focus of American television. Viewers had alternative programming, competing broadcasts, and emerging channels that catered to niche interests. This competition altered both the presentation of the game and the audience's expectations. The monopoly of the primetime national audience had ended, and Monday Night Football was compelled to adapt to a changing media environment. The spirit that had defined the early years, the raw personalities of Howard Cosell, Don Meredith, and Frank Gifford. The unpredictability of live commentary, the blend of drama and authenticity began to fade. Networks emphasized polish over personality, continuity over spontaneity, and visual spectacle over commentary-driven storytelling. The human chemistry that had fueled the broadcast in its formative years was replaced by procedural consistency, standardized graphics, and formulaic pacing designed to appeal to broad audiences and maximize ratings. The broadcast became slicker, more controlled, but also less emotionally immediate. This era saw the emergence of new voices in the booth. Broadcasters brought technical expertise, professionalism, and experience, yet few matched the cultural resonance of the originals. The emphasis shifted toward play, precision, statistical analysis, and corporate-friendly delivery. While this professionalism ensured clarity and reliability, it also diminished the unpredictable energy that had defined the early Monday Night Football experience. The program's charm, humor, and emotional edge were softened in favor of a more sanitized and marketable presentation. Cable television not only introduced competition, but also created new opportunities for sports media. ESPN, which had launched in 1979, began to cultivate a dedicated sports audience, providing extensive coverage of football, commentary, and analysis outside of primetime network slots. This shift forced ABC and the NFL to reevaluate their approach, placing greater emphasis on production values, camera work, and integration with advertising campaigns. Monday Night Football increasingly functioned as both a sports event and a corporate product, with sponsorships, promotions, and marketing strategies shaping broadcast decisions in ways that had previously been less pronounced. The changing media environment also altered audience expectations. Viewers became more sophisticated, more accustomed to polished graphics, replay technology, and detailed statistical analysis. The early charm of the broadcast, rooted in personality-driven storytelling, now had to compete with the increasing professionalism and analytical rigor of emerging sports networks. Fans expected both insight and entertainment, a balance that was more difficult to achieve as the broadcast adapted to corporate imperatives, technological innovation, and a fragmented audience. Technological advancements accelerated the transformation of the broadcast. Instant replay, computer-generated graphics, multiple camera angles, and enhanced audio improved the clarity and sophistication of the telecast. These innovations allowed viewers to experience the game in ways that were previously impossible, providing detailed perspectives on plays, strategy, and player performance. However, the focus on technology also shifted attention away from the human dynamics that had characterized the early broadcasts. Commentary became increasingly analytical, measured, and predictable, reducing the room for the spontaneous, personality-driven interactions that had captivated audiences in the 1970s. The evolution of the broadcast reflected broader cultural trends. The 1980s emphasized professionalism, marketability, and commercial success. Sports entertainment became increasingly commodified, with corporate interests exerting more influence over production decisions, scheduling, and on-air presentation. The transition from a personality-driven broadcast to a polished, market-focused telecast mirrored shifts in media culture more broadly, where spectacle, consistency, and profitability were increasingly prioritized over creativity, risk, and emotional resonance. At the same time, the NFL continued to expand its influence and cultural presence. Monday Night Football remained a ratings powerhouse, and its brand retained national recognition, yet the emotional intimacy of the early years was diminished. Audiences watched the spectacle, followed the statistics, and admired the production quality. But the unpredictable human drama, the charm, humor, and controversy of the original booth was largely absent. The broadcast had become a reflection of a mature league, an established media product, and a sophisticated entertainment enterprise, rather than a cultural experiment driven by charismatic pioneers. The changes in the 1980s also highlighted the professionalization of sports broadcasting. Analysts and commentators were selected for experience, expertise, and reliability rather than personality alone. Production teams were expanded, rehearsals increased, and scripts became more structured. The emphasis was on consistency, predictability, and control. While these changes enhanced the quality of the telecast, they also constrained the organic interactions and emotional unpredictability that had been the hallmark of the first decade of Monday Night Football. Cable television's growth further complicated the dynamics. With viewers increasingly able to choose alternative programming, the broadcast faced pressure to maintain ratings while appealing to broader demographic groups. Networks sought to minimize controversy, reduce unpredictability, and create a universally palatable product. The trade-off was clear. By striving for mass appeal and minimizing risk, the broadcast lost some of the raw edge, individuality, and emotional intensity that had made it culturally transformative. Advertisers, too, exerted influence in new ways. The expansion of commercial opportunities, sponsorships, and product placements reinforced the need for a broadcast that was controlled, predictable, and professional. Content decisions, timing, and presentation were increasingly guided by the imperatives of marketing, creating a tension between the demands of sport and the expectations of commerce. The broadcast's identity shifted from a groundbreaking cultural experiment to a highly structured commercial enterprise, reflecting the maturation of both the NFL and television as industries. This era also marked the passing of generational influence. The pioneers who had established Monday Night Football had set a precedent in personality, storytelling, and drama. As they exited or adapted to changing conditions, the broadcast transitioned to a model dominated by professionalism, technical precision, and production standards. The human unpredictability that had driven the early broadcasts was largely replaced by measured commentary, calculated presentation, and corporate oversight. The evolution underscored the tension between innovation and sustainability, creativity and professionalism, and the human and technological dimensions of broadcast football. By the mid-1980s, Monday Night Football had become both more sophisticated and less idiosyncratic. It remained a cultural institution, a platform for the NFL's expansion, and a ratings success, yet it had lost some of the spontaneous vitality that had defined its formative years. Audiences continued to engage with the spectacle, but the emotional resonance and unpredictability of the original team were less pronounced. The broadcast had matured into a polished, professional, and globally recognized product, reflecting the evolution of both football and television in an increasingly complex media environment. The 1980s and beyond highlighted the duality of progress. On one hand, the broadcast's technical and production quality set new standards for sports television. On the other hand, the intimate, personality-driven interactions that had defined the early experience were largely replaced by a more standardized and controlled approach. The balance between innovation, audience engagement, and professionalization shifted, creating a broadcast that was simultaneously more sophisticated and less emotionally immediate. Ultimately, the changes of the 1980s reflected the natural trajectory of Monday Night Football as both a cultural and commercial institution. The program adapted to new technologies, audiences, and market pressures, ensuring continued success and influence. Yet in doing so, it marked the end of an era characterized by charismatic personalities, unpredictability, and the human drama that had originally defined the broadcast. The spirit of the originals may have faded, but their legacy endured in the standards, expectations, and possibilities they had established for television, sports, and culture. By the turn of the 21st century, Monday Night Football had cemented its position not only as a staple of American sports culture, but as a blueprint for televised entertainment. The merger of ESPN and ABC, finalized in 2006, represented the culmination of decades-long evolution. Blending the pioneering energy of ABC's original broadcasts with the technical sophistication and year-round sports coverage of ESPN. Monday Night Football, once an experimental primetime event, had become a cultural institution whose influence extended far beyond the confines of stadiums and television studios. Its reach encompassed not only the domestic audience, but also an international viewership, global merchandising, and a model for sports broadcasting across leagues and continents. The legacy of Howard Cosell, Roone Arledge, Don Meredith, and Frank Gifford remained evident in the DNA of modern broadcasts. Cosell's insistence on candor, context, and social commentary had pushed sports media into a space that was simultaneously entertainment and reflection. Contemporary broadcasters inherited his drive to engage viewers not only with the action on the field, but with the narrative surrounding it. Arledge's vision, meanwhile, of integrating spectacle, drama, and personality into live sports had become standard practice. The techniques he pioneered, multi-camera angles, dynamic graphics, replay technology, and carefully constructed narratives are now ubiquitous in sports coverage from football to basketball, soccer, and beyond. The ethos of storytelling as central to broadcast sports owes its existence to his ambition and innovation. Meredith and Gifford's contributions to emotional resonance and authenticity also reverberate through the decades. Modern broadcasts may be more polished and structured, But the emphasis on charisma, humor, and chemistry in the booth is a direct lineage from the original team. Analysts are now often chosen not only for expertise, but for their ability to connect with viewers. To translate the technicalities of sport into accessible, emotionally engaging commentary. The human element, the bridge between audience and spectacle, remains a foundational principle of successful sports broadcasting, demonstrating that the lessons of Monday Night Football's early pioneers have endured even as the production environment has evolved. The cultural weight of Monday Night Football in the 21st century is evident in its ability to define national conversations and shared experiences. Game nights continue to interrupt routines, gather families and friends, and dominate social discourse. Advertisers still view the broadcast as prime real estate for exposure, and networks leverage it as a centerpiece for marketing campaigns and brand positioning. Yet, the scale and sophistication of the modern broadcast also reflect a departure from the experimental intimacy of the early years. The spontaneity, humor, and occasional abrasiveness that characterized Cosell and Meredith have been moderated in favor of broad appeal, corporate alignment, and polished professionalism. This evolution illustrates the trade-offs inherent in sustaining a cultural phenomenon across decades and audiences. Monday Night Football's influence also extends to the broader sports industry. The program demonstrated the viability of prime-time scheduling for professional leagues, inspiring similar ventures in basketball, baseball, and soccer. The integration of entertainment, storytelling, and technology has become a model emulated across sports, making the broadcast a case study in media strategy and cultural influence. By marrying spectacle with sport, Monday Night Football showed leagues and networks alike that athletic competition could be transformed into a narrative event, capable of engaging audiences emotionally, commercially, and culturally on a massive scale. Yet with all that has been gained, there have also been losses. The raw unpredictability and personality-driven energy of the early broadcasts have been tempered. The humor, irreverence, and occasional tension in the booth that drew viewers into an intimate relationship with the broadcast are less pronounced. Corporate priorities, brand protection, and audience segmentation have reduced the likelihood of moments of genuine surprise or unfiltered commentary. The evolution toward professionalism and polish, while necessary for sustainability and international expansion, has diminished some of the human immediacy that made the early broadcasts culturally transformative. The duality of legacy is central to understanding Monday Night Football in the modern era. On one hand, it has become a technological marvel, a commercial powerhouse, and a globally recognized cultural touchstone. On the other, the original personality-driven dynamic, the charm and unpredictability of the early pioneers, has been partially lost to history. Modern broadcasts excel in production values, consistency, and clarity. Yet the intimate drama that first captivated the nation has been replaced by a more structured, carefully managed presentation. This tension reflects the evolution of a broadcast from experimental spectacle to institution, balancing innovation, commercial viability, and audience expectations. Monday Night Football also remains a lens through which to examine broader social and cultural trends. Its evolution mirrors shifts in American media, technology, and consumption habits. The program has adapted to changing demographics, viewing platforms, and technological innovations, including high-definition broadcasts, streaming services, and interactive digital content. The cultural conversations sparked by games, player narratives, and social commentary reflect the enduring role of sports as both entertainment and a forum for national discourse. In this sense, Monday Night Football continues to function as a mirror of American society, even as its form and presentation have evolved. The influence of Monday Night Football on sports media personalities is also profound. Today's analysts, commentators, and sideline reporters operate within a framework established by Cosell, Meredith, and Gifford. The emphasis on storytelling, authenticity, and charisma is embedded in hiring practices, production design, and audience engagement strategies. While the modern broadcast may prioritize professionalism over irreverence, the foundational principles of connection, insight, and narrative engagement are unmistakably derived from the early Monday Night Football ethos. The show's legacy is therefore as much about cultural methodology as it is about entertainment. Financially and commercially, the modern iteration of Monday Night Football represents the realization of the ambitions set in motion by Roone Arledge and the original broadcast team. Revenue from advertising, licensing, sponsorships, and international distribution demonstrates the enduring commercial viability of the primetime football model. The NFL's brand equity, strengthened by decades of Monday night exposure, has created opportunities for global expansion, partnerships, and strategic marketing that were unimaginable in the early 1970s. The financial success underscores the foresight of the original experiment and its enduring relevance in contemporary sports media. Audience engagement, too, reflects both continuity and change. Fans continue to gather around games, discuss play-by-play events, and participate in the cultural rituals surrounding broadcasts. Social media amplifies this engagement, creating real-time conversation, debate, and interaction that extend the experience beyond the confines of the television screen. While the human unpredictability of Cosell and Meredith may be diminished, the broadcast continues to create communal experiences, shared narratives, and emotional resonance, albeit through a more technologically mediated and polished lens. In reflecting on what was gained and what was lost, Monday Night Football embodies the tension inherent in sustaining a pioneering cultural phenomenon. It has achieved global reach, technological innovation, commercial success, and institutional recognition. Yet in doing so, it has moderated the spontaneous personality-driven energy that once defined its identity. The program illustrates the challenges of balancing innovation, sustainability, and cultural impact, demonstrating that the evolution of media, technology, and society inevitably shapes both the opportunities and the constraints of broadcast sports. The legacy of Monday Night Football is therefore both monumental and complex. It remains a benchmark for sports broadcasting, a model of media innovation, and a touchstone of American culture. Its influence is evident in how games are produced, narrated, and consumed, not only in football, but across every major sport. Yet the nostalgia for the original pioneers, their unpredictability, humor, and emotional resonance reminds viewers that the human element, the interplay of personality, emotion, and spontaneity remains central to the power of live sports. The tension between progress and authenticity, professionalism and personality, spectacle and intimacy, defines the broadcast's enduring story. Monday Night Football in the modern era is both a continuation and a transformation of the original experiment. Its cultural weight persists, its technical and commercial achievements are extraordinary, and its influence on sports broadcasting is indisputable. Yet it also serves as a reminder that every innovation carries both gains and losses. The personalities, creativity, and spontaneity that first captured the nation's imagination remain part of its mythos, even as the program adapts to the imperatives of contemporary media. In this balance, Monday Night Football exemplifies the complexity of sustaining a cultural institution across decades, media evolutions, and societal changes. 50 years ago, a football game broadcast on a Monday night set in motion a transformation that would reverberate through American culture, sports, and television. Monday Night Football was more than a simple broadcast. It was an audacious experiment, a gamble that challenged conventions, and a reflection of a society in motion. The Cleveland Browns faced the New York Jets on September 21, 1970. And while the scoreboard recorded the final tally, the true impact was measured in something far more profound. A nation was about to be forever changed. From the earliest broadcasts, Monday Night Football redefined time itself. The week was no longer measured by the work week, by appointments, or by routine chores. It was measured by the anticipation of the game, the primetime ritual that interrupted schedules, gatherings, and even sleep. Families rearranged their evenings, bars filled with spectators, offices hushed as the televised spectacle began. The program became a social event, a collective experience that united disparate audiences under the glow of stadium lights transmitted into living rooms across the country. In doing so, Monday Night Football achieved something that few cultural phenomena accomplish. It created a shared national rhythm. The show's influence extended beyond mere scheduling. Television, once a passive medium, became a conduit for storytelling, drama, and social commentary. Under Roone Arledge's direction, the broadcast combined the spectacle of sport with the intimacy of narrative. Howard Cosell's voice carried analysis, critique, and moral reflection, challenging audiences to consider the game not merely as a contest of athletic skill, but as a microcosm of society. Don Meredith and Frank Gifford offered humor, warmth, and relatability, grounding the broadcast in human emotion. Together, they transformed Monday nights into a stage where football was both entertainment and reflection. A drama where the players on the field were actors and the audience at home, both witness and participant. Yet the spectacle came at a cost. The human toll on the personalities who brought the broadcast to life was significant. The pioneers endured relentless schedules, scrutiny from networks and viewers, and the pressures of living under a national spotlight every week. Cosell's candor, which inspired admiration and animosity alike, demanded emotional intensity and personal sacrifice. Meredith's charm and humor required constant performance, balancing levity with insight, while Gifford's steadiness masked the unrelenting demands of professionalism. Their brilliance reshaped television and football, but it exacted a price that became evident in moments of fatigue, conflict, and eventual departure. Beyond the booth, the players themselves were swept into the transformative current of Monday Night Football. Primetime exposure amplified their performances, personalities, and personas, turning athletes into cultural icons almost overnight. The stakes on the field increased. Every mistake was broadcast, every triumph magnified. Football became both art and theater, and players were conscious participants in a narrative larger than the game. The pressure to perform, to entertain, and to embody public expectation intensified the already immense physical and psychological demands of professional football. Fame arrived with opportunity, but also with scrutiny, isolation, and the awareness that every action was measured against the expectations of millions. The impact on the nation's identity was profound. Monday Night Football became more than entertainment. It became a lens through which Americans viewed themselves, their communities, and their values. Issues of race, class, celebrity, and morality were reflected in commentary, on-field interactions, and media coverage. The broadcast mirrored societal debates, amplified cultural shifts, and helped establish television as a medium through which national consciousness could be shaped. Sports, once a separate arena of competition, merged with culture, commerce, and social reflection. Monday nights became a time when America watched itself through the prism of athletic drama, narrative tension, and human ambition. The transformation extended into the economics of sports. Advertising, sponsorship, and merchandising reached unprecedented levels, shaping how games were produced, presented, and consumed. The integration of commerce into the spectacle of Monday Night Football set a precedent for the modern sports industry, establishing a model in which ratings, revenue, and brand influence intertwined inseparably with the athletic event itself. The broadcast demonstrated that a single program could redefine commercial opportunities, creating a lucrative ecosystem that extended beyond the game to encompass media, marketing, and consumer culture. Technological innovation also accelerated the shift. Multiple camera angles, instant replay, dynamic graphics, and enhanced audio expanded the viewer's experience, offering perspectives and insights previously unavailable. Technology became a participant in the spectacle, enhancing understanding while elevating expectations. The combination of human performance and technological amplification transformed football into a multi-dimensional narrative, accessible, compelling, and immersive for audiences in ways that fundamentally changed how sport was consumed. Yet for all its achievements, Monday Night Football also serves as a reminder of the tension between ambition and human limitation. The intensity of the broadcast, the drive for innovation, and the pursuit of cultural dominance imposed immense demands on those who shaped it. Careers were defined, but personal costs were substantial. Burnout, conflict, and emotional strain were inevitable consequences of a program that demanded constant creativity, authenticity, and public engagement. The lessons of the early pioneers underscore the paradox at the heart of innovation. Greatness is inseparable from sacrifice. The legacy of Monday Night Football is measured not only in ratings, technological advancements, or commercial success, but in the transformation of American society. It reshaped the national calendar, influenced cultural conversations, and created a template for how sports and media could intersect. It elevated athletes to unprecedented visibility, established broadcast personalities as cultural commentators, and set standards for production, storytelling, and spectacle that endured to this day. The broadcast became both a mirror and a shaper of national identity, influencing how Americans perceive themselves, their heroes, and their communal rituals. Looking back across 5 decades, it is clear that Monday Night Football changed more than the game of football. It changed how television is conceived, how stories are told, and how audiences engage with spectacle. It created a model in which drama, commerce, personality, and performance coexist, sometimes harmoniously, sometimes in tension. It demonstrated the power of innovation, the cost of fame, and the capacity of sport to reflect and shape society. In doing so, it solidified a place in history not only as a broadcast, but as a cultural institution, a turning point in the American imagination. The human cost of ambition, fame, and innovation remains central to the story. The pioneers of Monday Night Football sacrificed personal stability, emotional balance, and professional security to push boundaries and redefine television. Players felt the magnified pressure of public scrutiny. Executives navigated the tension between creative vision and commercial imperatives. Together, these forces illustrate that the creation of a cultural phenomenon demands resilience, courage, and endurance. The brilliance of Monday Night Football is inseparable from the personal sacrifices of those who brought it to life, reminding us that the spectacle of success is often mirrored by the quiet struggles of its architects. Ultimately, Monday Night Football is more than a program. It is a landmark in the evolution of sport, media, and culture. It represents the convergence of human ambition, technological innovation, commercial enterprise, and national identity. It has illuminated the possibilities of storytelling, elevated athletes and broadcasters to iconic status, and left an indelible imprint on American life. The echoes of Cosell's voice, Meredith's laughter, Gifford's steadiness, and Arledge's vision reverberate through every contemporary broadcast, a testament to the enduring power of creativity, risk, and the human spirit. It is impossible to consider the night America changed without acknowledging the paradox at its core. Monday Night Football was both a triumph and a challenge, a celebration of innovation and a reminder of the cost of pushing boundaries. It transformed the national consciousness while demanding extraordinary contributions from those who made it possible. The cultural, technological, and emotional legacy of Monday Night Football continues to inform the present while honoring the complexity of its past. Its story is a reflection on ambition, spectacle, and the enduring human desire to create something larger than life, something that resonates far beyond the confines of a single game or broadcast. The night America changed was not simply the first Monday night in 1970. It was every week since. Every broadcast that drew the nation's attention, every commentator who lent their voice, every player who risked body and reputation, and every technological innovation that enhanced the spectacle. Monday Night Football is a chronicle of ambition and consequence, triumph and exhaustion, joy and sacrifice. Its history is inseparable from the broader story of American media, culture, and identity. In remembering its first broadcast and tracing its evolution, one recognizes that the game itself was only part of the narrative. The true story is the human one, of those who dared to innovate, to entertain, and to change the nation's evenings forever. In the quiet moments after the stadium lights dim, after the roar of the crowd subsides and the players retreat from the field Monday night. Football exists not merely as a game that is ended, but as a reflection of something far larger. It is a mirror in which the hopes, ambitions, and contradictions of America itself are visible. For over 50 years, the broadcast has chronicled not only the athletic feats of men chasing a football, but also the evolving culture, the nation grappling with identity, spectacle, and the pursuit of collective attention. Every touchdown, every interception, and every sideline exchange has been amplified by television. And in that amplification, the game became more than sport. It became ritual, theater, and an enduring symbol of ambition and its consequences. Monday Night Football was born at the intersection of risk and vision. Roone Arledge's gamble to move football into prime time was audacious, defying conventional wisdom that the American public would not engage with sports outside the confines of Sunday afternoon. The broadcast became an experiment in spectacle, in the fusion of narrative, performance, and competition. Howard Cosell's commanding voice, Don Meredith's humor, and Frank Gifford's steady presence created a dynamic that was both unpredictable and magnetic. Together, they transformed what had once been a simple contest of physical skill into a performance that captivated millions, giving the American audience a weekly event to anticipate, discuss, and even debate. The brilliance of this transformation was matched by its cost. The personal sacrifices made by the pioneers of Monday Night Football were immense. The demands of live primetime television imposed relentless pressure. Cosell faced the dual burden of providing rigorous analysis and confronting social issues with candor, often exposing himself to criticism and adoration in equal measure. Meredith's charm required constant emotional energy, balancing levity with insight in a way that resonated with millions. Gifford's calm professionalism masked the long hours, preparation, and stamina necessary to maintain credibility and authenticity. Behind the scenes, executives and producers worked tirelessly to orchestrate the perfect broadcast, navigating technical challenges, network expectations, and the unpredictable nature of live sport. The human cost of this endeavor was profound, yet it was the emotional and professional investment of these individuals that allowed Monday Night Football to become what it did. Beyond the booth, the broadcast transformed the lives of athletes and audiences alike. Players, once known primarily to local fans, now faced a national spotlight. Every action, every decision on the field was transmitted to millions of homes, making the stakes higher than ever before. The pressure to perform at an elite level was compounded by the awareness of being watched, analyzed, and celebrated or condemned in real time. At the same time, fans were offered an unprecedented intimacy with the game. Television allowed them to witness strategy, technique, and emotion as never before. They were not passive spectators. They became participants in a shared cultural experience, their collective attention validating the significance of the spectacle. The cultural impact of Monday Night Football extended far beyond the technical achievements of broadcasting. It shaped national rituals, influencing the rhythm of the week, social gatherings, and public discourse. Families and communities organized themselves around the game. Conversations at work or school paused in anticipation, and local bars became arenas of collective viewing. The program became a conduit through which Americans engaged with broader social issues, whether through Cosell's commentary on Muhammad Ali and civil rights, discussions about labor disputes, or the reflection of societal values in on-field competition. In every way, the broadcast was both mirror and lens, reflecting what America was while simultaneously shaping what it would become. Yet Monday Night Football also represents the tension inherent in turning passion into product. The spectacle that thrilled millions was inseparable from commercial imperatives, sponsorship obligations, and corporate strategy. Television networks invested heavily, seeking both ratings and revenue, while advertisers leveraged the captive audience for maximum exposure. The balance between maintaining the integrity of the sport and delivering entertainment for a national audience was delicate. Every decision, from camera placement to commentary style, was influenced by both artistic vision and commercial necessity. This tension persists in modern broadcasts, where technological sophistication and marketing strategy coexist with the fundamental human drama on the field. The immortality of Monday Night Football lies not in individual players or broadcasters, though their contributions were invaluable, but in the idea itself. It endures because it demonstrated the potential of sport to transcend its immediate context, to become cultural ritual, narrative, and spectacle simultaneously. The concept of a weekly, prime-time national broadcast reshaped the media landscape, influenced every major professional sport, and altered audience expectations for live television. Even as the original voices fade from the booth and the pioneers of innovation pass from public memory, the structure, philosophy, and ambition they established remain embedded in every broadcast, replay, and commentary segment. Modern Monday Night Football is both a continuation and a transformation of that original vision. Technological advancements, high-definition graphics, streaming services, and global broadcasts have expanded the reach and sophistication of the program. Audiences can engage in real-time analysis, access extensive statistics, and participate in a digital conversation that spans continents. Yet the core principles remain: storytelling, drama, and human connection. Even in a highly polished, professionalized production environment, the legacy of Cosell, Meredith, Gifford, and Arledge is evident in the focus on narrative, the interplay of personalities, and the attempt to capture not only what happens on the field, but what it means to the audience. The human cost, however, remains a cautionary undertone. Fame, expectation, and the relentless demand for performance take their toll on all involved. Players face physical and psychological strain, broadcasters shoulder constant scrutiny, and producers navigate the dual pressures of creative innovation and corporate accountability. The story of Monday Night Football is inseparable from these sacrifices, highlighting the paradox that monumental cultural achievements often require extraordinary human effort, resilience, and endurance. The brilliance of the broadcast, the way it transformed sport and culture, was only possible because of the dedication and perseverance of those who labored behind the scenes and in front of the camera. Reflecting on the 50-year journey, Monday Night Football is a testament to the transformative power of vision. It changed how Americans consume sport, how television functions as a cultural platform, and how narratives of ambition, triumph, and human drama are constructed and shared. It has influenced generations of athletes, broadcasters, and fans, creating a template for excellence that persists even as styles and technologies evolve. Its history is a chronicle of innovation, collaboration, sacrifice, and cultural resonance, demonstrating the capacity of sport to shape not only entertainment, but identity, ritual, and societal conversation. Ultimately, Monday Night Football is more than a broadcast, more than a game, more than a fixture of American culture. It is a story of ambition tested, of ideas realized, and of a nation captivated by the drama of competition. It is a story of human creativity, courage, and sacrifice, a reminder that greatness often comes with personal cost. And yet, despite the evolution, commercialization, and technological expansion, the essence of what made Monday Night Football extraordinary endures. It remains an experiment in connection, narrative, and spectacle, a reflection of who we are, what we value, and how we come together as a society. As the final whistle blows on any given Monday night, as the crowd disperses and the stadium falls silent, one is reminded that the true resonance of the broadcast lies not in the scoreboard or the statistics, but in the enduring impact it has had on the culture of a nation. It is in that stillness, that quiet after the game, that the legacy of Monday Night Football can be fully felt. The echoes of laughter, debate, and emotion linger in living rooms, bars, and hearts across America, add testament to the courage, vision, and human drama that created a ritual unlike any other. Monday Night Football was, and remains, a mirror of dreams, contradictions, and the relentless pursuit of excellence. Its story is one of audacity, invention, and sacrifice. Its legacy is etched not only in television history but in the collective memory of a nation. And in the silence after the final whistle, one can still sense the heartbeat of that first broadcast. The ambitions of those who dared to innovate. And the enduring truth that some nights, a football game can change everything. The game is over, the lights have dimmed, and the stadium is empty. But the echo of Monday Night Football remains eternal.